Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the unofficial companion podcast to HBO's hit show Industry. I'm Jen.
I'm Kristen.
We are the Wall Street Skinny, and this is the penultimate episode of season 4. I cannot believe we're here already. So this is season 4, episode 7. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this episode coming off the high of last week's episode where I was like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to us. We need to read every line. This is going to be a 4-hour recording. I feel a little bit more about this episode like I did about season 3, episode 5. But I do think there's a lot here to unpack. There are some really great plot points here. There's a lot to get into. So let's get
finance,
started.
Actually. Yeah, there's a decent amount of finance that we can talk about as well, which always makes us happy.
Absolutely. And so the name of this episode, just before you get into recounting everything, is Points of Emphasis. I had no reading on that whatsoever. But as we're fading in from black, we have the opening chords of a song called Veritas Quo from Daft Punk. I'm a huge Daft Punk fan, so I was really excited to get that song. But I actually didn't know anything about the song, so I went ahead and looked it up. Phonetically, it's very disco, but it also can be rearranged to read disco very. And Discovery was the name of the album that it came from. But according to daftpunkfandom.com, it is a play on the Latin phrase quo vadis, which translates to either where are you going or to what end. I kind of wish that had been the title for this episode because it reminds me of Harper and Yasmin in the last episode being like till the end. And I think would have been more fitting for the creative arc of this episode. So Kristen, I'll let you take it from here, but that was my little nugget of research that I did on Daft Punk Wiki or whatever.
Okay, we open, and if you remember in the last episode, Whitney had given Henry this letter. You see the letter, and it's Yaz taking a look at it. Obviously, Henry has gone to Yaz to be like, what the fuck do I do? Henry's looking at the note, and he's like, it reads like a guru terrorist manifesto. But the point of this was to tell Henry that ignorance is not a credible legal defense. And he's like, do I wipe my phone? What do I do? And Yaz is like, no, that's an admission of guilt. And he's like, but I'm not guilty.
Like the worst criminal ever, right? That's how I would be. I'd be like, what do I do? Like, do I throw my phone away? But here's what I don't really understand about this. You've got Henry with this letter that is a written confession from the bad guy being like, here's what I did. Now you're implicated. And I think the way that Henry is phrasing it to Yasmin, first he says, what are we going to do? And then he says, first, what am I going to do? And it switched from this narrative to like, we're in this together to like, no, it's all about me. And I get
and he says that later.
Yeah. Too. And I get that the takeaway is that ignorance won't be enough to spare him from jail. Now, I'm not a legal expert, but at this point, I'm thinking Henry and his family control the newspapers. They also control the freaking government. Isn't the whole point of all this status that he's never had to face any consequences? So why would this be any different?
Right. And literally his next thing says the fucking headlines write themselves. And it's like, you write the fucking headlines. He could go to freaking Lord Norton and be like, help me write the headline to basically keep me and Yaz out of the crosshairs or figure out a way to orchestrate us coming clean. So I'm with you. I feel like that was a tiny bit of a plot hole. But
and in Yasmin's defense, he's like, you knew about this. You dragged me into this. Yasmin was just doing what Yasmin does best, which is like, hey, somebody wants a favor. I've done a favor. I'm connecting everybody. I dragged you out of your suicidal hole, by the way. You're welcome. I just didn't know the only reason that anyone would ever conceivably choose you is because you're so incompetent that they can clearly manipulate you, not really acknowledging the fact that it's her incompetence and her ability to be manipulated that got them into that situation in the first place.
Exactly. Yasmin says, we live in a house paid for by tender. Both of our salaries will be cut off. Our stock is worthless. And then she looks at Henry, realizing that like his face has kind of changed. And she's just like, where's the rest of the money, Henry? And he doesn't say anything. So we had kind of speculated this. And
you had speculated this. I was like, of course they have money. To the best of our knowledge, they had all this money. So now where is all the money?
Yeah. And he says that he used it to buy tender stock. I wouldn't be surprised if Whitney suggested that. But like, I mean, how stupid are you? By the way, like, it is really dumb to ever put all of your eggs in one basket. Like, please, guys, diversify. I mean, if your company gives you stock, like, you can have some, but like, don't have everything in your freaking company. Like,
if there is one thing that everybody in the financial services industry has learned when you are working for an institution that functions anything like a bank, it is the second your stock vests, you sell it.
So, Jen, by the way, was at Lehman. So like,
yes, exactly.
And
so, I mean, listen, not everybody does this, but when you work for a company, you are implicitly long that company, whether you have explicitly been granted stock or not. So you already have this long exposure. To add to your equity exposure in said company, man, you must really believe in this thing and be willing to die on that hill. Because guess what? If it goes to zero, your salary, your employment, and any stock that they have given you is going to zero. Why would you tie up additional funds in this company? It's so insane. But again, Henry is just stupid. Like,
I mean, so stupid. Literally, if you had any financial advisor, they would be like, first of all, do not put all of your money in equities. Do not put all of your money into one stock. And do not put all of your money into the one stock that you also happen to be the CEO of. I mean, literally 101 moron playbook. So
to your point, I could see Whitney being able to manipulate Henry into doing that, being like, I did it, bro. Everyone's doing it. And Henry being like, oh gosh, I hope everybody likes me. I'll do it too.
I agree with that. So Henry then says, why are we talking about money? The public perception of my morality is on the block. Please take this with the love it's intended, but nobody gives a fuck how you come out of this, not in the wider scheme. And this goes back to this whole thing that I literally had said, I think it was like in episode 3, which is like, all he wants is he wants people to think he's a good person. Yeah. But he's like not. Like,
correct. In the same breath as being like my morality, being like, by the way, wifey, no one gives a fuck what happens to you. This is all about me.
Yep. But that's all he cares about is how he's perceived, looking like the good person.
But also he's like transposing his trauma about Lumi onto this situation. With Lumi, he was the one driving the bus. He was just a figurehead with this. Like, not to excuse Henry's incompetence, but it's like, you brought up this analogy, I think, in the last episode, where it's like, is it Veep or is it House of Cards? Like, Henry's the Veep, right? He is the incompetent one, and Whitney is the House of Cards. But like, this is what set me off on the wrong foot with this episode, was setting up the reason why Henry has to take the fall. Because it's like, listen, I understand that Henry is dumb and incompetent and like put himself in this situation or whatever. But like, just who is the adult in the room to be like, you know what? You're a narcissist and an infant. But like, guess what? There's a very easy out of this. Let's call your uncle and your godfather right now. Get him in the room. Tell him what happened, and they'll get you out of this.
And be the insider coming clean.
Blowing the whistle.
To people to blowing the whistle. So I'm with you. And I think that was just this like tiny little plot point that just didn't tie for us.
Tiny. So, this is like the whole crux of the situation, is that all we've been building up to this season is Henry was some emotionally and mentally fragile, that this one job was the only thing keeping it together for him. And when it's all collapsing around him, he actually has the path to be the voice of morality and be the one to say, hey, listen, I was put in this situation. I'm going to be the whistleblower. I'm going to say what Whitney is doing wrong. And now that's his path to restitution of his moral standing within society.
Yeah. Yep. And so Yaz is obviously like, we're going to end up with nothing. Why do you give a shit about a stupid press release? And he just screams, I'm a good person. The world shall tell that back to me. Otherwise, what am I doing here? Otherwise, what am I for? But screaming so in her face that she even like kind of jumps and lean backs. And then she finally kind of is like, uncle, she says, you're right. Of course. I'm so sorry. And you then hear this song come in, which again, I know Jen, you had sent me. It's called In Rome Promises. I can let you talk about it.
It's called The Promise by When in Rome. And it was like building in the background. It's like a great 80s song. I love this song. But when he's in her face, it is so evocative, that scene on the yacht with her dad, where he's like on top of her, or at the end when they're having their confrontation. And he's telling her how like, I want to be better. Like, that's what I want. What else am I here for, or whatever. And that's Henry's lines about like basically why this is so important to him. But I do think in that moment, Yasmin was like reliving the trauma of her dad. And that's why she checks out, and you see this switch flip in her eyes where she's just like, you're right, of course. And they kind of embrace and fall down on the bed. And as the song starts playing, he says quietly to her, we're not the ones to blame here. Other people let this happen. Remember that. But like, that's true. Again, like, it is true. So why don't you I'm totally with you. They fall back in the bed and the chorus starts to come in. And you guys know this, I was like, I'm sorry, but I can't find the right words to. But instead of going into the chorus, it's like, I'm sorry. And then it snaps out and it cuts from night to day all of a sudden. And we get our words industry. I have like never seen that happen in a TV show where or in a movie where the soundtrack, it wasn't like a song that was playing in the room and it suddenly it got turned off. The soundtrack, as we've been talking about all season, is really like the third character or the fourth wall or whatever you want to call it. I don't know film buff terms in this show. And it was so jarring how that happened. And it's this very abortive, like unfulfilled thing, because everyone knows that tune, I think, like da-na-na-na-na. And but
they cut the way they cut it. It's like so
sudden and so unsatisfactory. You're like, what happened?
Yeah. Like,
and you just left me hanging. I've never seen that happen before.
You texted me and said that.
I like to live stream Kristen. She had watched it before I did. So I was like live streaming her my reactions because the first 2 songs, I was like, this is amazing. Where's this episode going? And then my text descended into like, what is happening?
So we then go into the next scene to Stern Tao, and somehow Tender's stock, they say, is up almost 10%. Tender had issued a press release with Tony Day's denials in writing, and somehow the market like was okay with that, which I mean, okay. And so Sweepy says there's no information about any kind of new audit, just they're reiterating the results of the previous ones. They're asking Harper, like, what do we do? She says, I guess we hold the line until the new one's confirmed. Kwabena, who's again the stand-in, to be like, well, who's forcing them to do that? Which, like, I mean, like,
you've said this a million times. Like, yeah,
really? Like, okay. Like,
also, we get Kwabena wiping off the whiteboard that Eric made them put in place where they wrote like plus $3 million to now say down $16 million. So,
I missed the down 16.
Yeah. So that's the delta on their position.
Dude, then they would in theory need to like put some more. Well, maybe not, because again, their margin account, maybe that might actually be okay. So we don't.
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, there's some fluctuations that are allowed for, especially being up.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but the point is, we're not picking up where we left off, where they were up on the position, and now it's corrected slightly. Now they are actively very down, so they are in a bad position where they do need something to actively happen.
Yep. Sweepy asked, "What would Eric's take be on this?" And Harper's just like, "Well, how the fuck should I know? He decided not to be here." So from here, this is so funny because we go into the Tender offices in the next scene, and Whitney's just sitting there, by the way, in a black turtleneck, which it's funny. I thought you were to wear a black turtleneck too. We got called out for that the other day, but it was so evocative of Elizabeth Holmes, and I hadn't seen them have him in an outfit like that before. It's always been the suit. So I thought it was so interesting that they decided to do the black turtleneck, which it really pisses me off that it's now like this code for like a woman who commits fraud. Because actually, no, it was originally Steve Jobs who was the one who always wore the black turtleneck. And it's this idea that people don't want to devote time and energy to picking out their clothes. So if you have the same thing, it's one less thing you have to focus on. It's like people who eat the same thing every day.
You're a uniform dresser and a uniform eater.
It's one less thing I have to think about. So then I can like devote my time to all the other shit. And I happen to just like turtlenecks. So I hate that fucking Elizabeth Holmes has like ruined it for all of us. But anyway, so
Kristen's guru terrorist manifesto in defense of black turtlenecks. But also we do get, first of all, I'm shocked to see Whitney, because here we were at the end of last episode. We're like, clearly he's gone. Is he going to the Russians? Is he going to the Americans? Who's he going to? Then it's like, Whitney's there.
Jen messaged me. She said, don't tell me anything. Just tell me, is Eric or Whitney back? And I was like, Whitney's back. And in the description, it was funny because we get these screeners and like they're kind of works in progress. And so it had said that Eric was back and I got all excited. So I'm watching the whole episode waiting for Eric, and then he's not. I don't think he's coming.
I never even look at the descriptions. That's really funny. Like it never even occurred to me to look to that for clues. But I was like, okay, Whitney's just chilling in this office after delivering this letter. And we've got Henry, by the way, for once wearing a blue shirt. He's no longer in salmon. He seems to, I guess he had to sell the salmon wardrobe to fund their diminishing finances.
Yeah. So you have Henry just like glaring at Whitney through these glass offices. Whitney marches into the Henry's office and says, get whatever you need off your chest. I need you to focus. And Henry's just like, I've been thinking about going to the authorities. Why shouldn't I? And Whitney says, you already know why you didn't go where you would have gone. I'm sorry. Still, why won't you go to the authorities? Like,
go to the police. I hate to be that girl who's watching the horror movie, be like, don't go into the dark room. The killer's right behind there. Like, no, but like, don't go into the dark room. The killer's right behind there. Like,
the first thing he should have done, like, yes, gone to Yaz, also gone to his uncle and been like, Uncle
you
Martin,
have the entire infrastructure of power. Why did we build up this infrastructure of power to be the thing that has kept you from facing consequences in your entire life? If when the rubber hits the road, it's not actually going to help you out.
I mean, he is in like the best position of anyone who possibly could be. Honestly, it's almost stupid and reckless on Whitney's part to have picked him, someone who does have the hands of power, who could like throw it on him. But I mean, Henry's also clearly too stupid to figure that out because he's like, I'm an accomplice. And Whitney's like,
which is, I think, the bigger point is that he was chosen for his pliancy and his incompetence rather than like his connections helped, right? Because obviously their connections with the government are what got them the banking license and all that fun stuff. So, I mean, I get why, but this is where just like we have to suspend our disbelief. So we'll stop saying this, but just understand that as a viewer, this was my feeling throughout the whole episode, that like this plot was so full of holes, or this giant one hole made it hard for me to feel the level of like, oh my God,
Yeah.
that I think like the satisfaction that you're
If it was
supposed to
Robert, I would feel that way, where you're like, oh shit, what are we going to do? You know what I
That's
mean?
a
Like if it had been Robert
great
who had
point.
been the one who was framed, but because it's Henry, like,
And
anyway,
he has Yaz with a brain
yes. But again, I
who
do
knows
think
how to manipulate politicians and government. So like, had he not been such a dick to
Mhm.
her, and that's kind of where we go
Yeah, I
with
think
this. So
that's
we can save that, but I think his brain is actually Yasmin. You know, in Men in Black, you've got the little alien inside pulling all
pulling
the
the
strings and
strings.
running the levers. Yeah, Yaz is the little alien inside Henry's brain that like is the only thing that's keeping him propelled forward on this path to success. And when he gets in her face, she decides, you know what? We are no
That's
longer on the same
yes.
team. And that's why this glaring plot hole is allowed to exist and why
Yeah.
we can, I think, effectively suspend disbelief on it because then it fits better with Yasmin's
Well,
narrative.
it's interesting when she kind of said the like, oh shoot, I'm so sorry. That to me was her being like, I now need to act the part of pretending that I'm going
Yes.
along with you.
Yes.
And actually, I'm going to now figure out how
Correct.
to screw you.
How to save
over.
myself. And I don't give a
Mhm.
shit what happens to you.
Yeah. So Whitney, for the audience, says fraud, embezzlement, market manipulation, hire the cream of the crop, legal talent who are not escaping jail time. And so Henry then asks, why would you write me that letter? Also, why would you write him that letter? And Whitney says, I don't want my CEO to go AWOL. He tries to tell Henry that everything that they have done together since Henry came in has been above board and that they are now making real revenue. And he says, once we have successfully phased out the inflated third-party acquisition flaws, Henry's just like, fake. Use the fucking word. Whitney, again, is like spewing this bullshit. And he goes, the misalignment between the velocity of my vision and the velocity of regulation, that gap is where smart people have always made money.
That line was pulled straight from Adam Newman, right? That was like 100%.
Yeah.
I was watching this and I was like, this is straight from the pages of WeWork.
Yep. And so he says, basically delay until our overrepresented cash flows can be swallowed by a much larger balance sheet. Henry asks how, and Whitney says, targeted acquisition, hostile takeover.
I think we should explain what a hostile takeover is, just like at its base.
Yeah. So look, a hostile takeover, if you think about one company buying another, right, that's obviously a takeover. But the difference between a friendly deal and a hostile deal is just that in a hostile deal, the board of directors doesn't want it. They say no. And the company is like, screw you, we're going straight to the shareholders. So it's not necessarily hostile until you've talked to the target and the target has rejected you and you go to the shareholder. So like, he doesn't necessarily know that PierPoint would say no. So at this point, he could just say like, take over. So minor thing. Again, we're going to see kind of what happens with Wilhelmina and everything, because Henry's like, how would that even work? He says a few months ago, he said we should increase our stake in PierPoint. I used a Cayman and Luxembourg SPV to build an undisclosed synthetic position to buy shares in PierPoint. Al Mirage is spinning them out, and they're basically looking for an exit, blah, 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 blah. But what he's saying here, because Jen, you messaged me and you were like, how does that work?
How? Yeah.
And I was like,
and I feel like it's also very important to acknowledge when we reach the limit of our personal financial knowledge. So to me, okay, to set up a special purpose vehicle, which is what SPV stands for, to make acquisitions so that nobody knows who's ultimately behind them, totally fine. We got it, right? But he says to build up a synthetic position, which to me means derivative form.
Yes.
So once we get to derivatives, all of a sudden we had talked about total return swaps in the prior episode. Same thing with like puts and calls or anything of this where you get synthetic exposure to something without actually owning it or physically being short it. How does a synthetic position of your ownership in a company impact your ability to do things with it?
No, and it doesn't. And so if you are a shareholder, you have the ability to vote. If you have a synthetic position, right, if you have a call option or whatever, you don't own the underlying asset. So you don't actually get the vote, right? You don't get paid dividends. You don't get any of that stuff. You don't get the benefits that come with being an actual owner in the business. So you're 100% right there. I think what they're trying to say is that, you know, there's this like agreement, this derivative contract they've entered in with a bank via some like offshore entity. Essentially, these SPVs, these are separate legal entities, but it exists separately from the firm that created it or the person that created it, which means it has its own legal identity on paper. And then this offshoring just means that it's held in. So for example, the Caymans, there's no corporate income tax there, which is why a lot of people
Which is why all the
use
hedge
it.
funds, like, yeah.
There's minimal public disclosure. So again, ownership can stay private, light regulatory environment. And Luxembourg is pretty common for Europe. Again, in the US, it's much more common to say like Caymans. I will add one more thing. In the real world, when there is any meaningful position built in a company, there typically are disclosures that are triggered.
Yep.
So, if you get to like 5% under the SEC, so in the US, you have to file to announce that you now have built this position. I think it's 3% in the UK under FCA rules. The synthetic positions obviously can fly under the radar because you don't technically own the shares, but the counterparty that you're doing it can. This is actually a loophole that in 2008, Porsche stealthily built a position and initiated a takeover of Volkswagen.
Cool.
And they used options to basically secretly build up this massive position before revealing. And post 2008, because of this, there was then additional disclosure regulations that got put in place. So if there are any synthetic positions, even that now likely needs to be disclosed. So it doesn't sound like this would be legal had he done it that way. So even if this was something that was workable and he was taking the Porsche playbook model, still like this would be illegal, which would not stop Whitney from doing anything.
No,
But
yeah.
Whitney then goes and he says, due to the transformational merger, the audit must reflect pro forma consolidation. By the way, pro forma just means post-merger, like after the deal has happened. He says, since you unwisely fired my auditor of choice, we have to add intermediaries, add complexity to the jurisdictional fog, back to the clouds from prior episode, of those who audit us, plus the media smokescreen of a turbo bullish headline. Henry is looking at this and he is like, you are an actual psycho. There's not a single person on earth who would think like that in this scenario.
Yeah, basically what Whitney is saying is like, we can't order a new audit now because the news from the announcement of this merger is going to be so great that everyone's going to think we need a more conservative audit after the fact. So it doesn't get bubbly and frothy with all this great news. And Henry's like, no one thinks that way. Like that's not a thing.
No, well, because again, it's like goes back to just he's this like stone cold psycho. And it is so funny how in all of the prior episodes, you saw this like cool, calm, collected Whitney. And in this episode, he is like a completely different person. He has snapped a little bit. And he's not even like putting on the show, not even trying to fake empathy or whatever. But Henry finally puts his head in his hands, like, what do I do? And Whitney says, believe in us one more time. And then Ferdinand knocks on the door and says that there's a board meeting that's about to happen in an hour. Jen, I'm going to let you talk about some of the various parties in the UK. But basically, the next scene opens with Lisa Dern, who is, I didn't realize she was Secretary of State. They said business secretary. I didn't know this was the same thing.
So to be clear, that was a question for me. So we have Lisa Dern on this podcast getting grilled, and they say the Secretary of State, but they're talking about her almost in the third person. They're using this very formal title to address her. So I was confused because in the US, Secretary of State is this huge title. Okay. It is the person who's overseeing like all foreign policy for the US.
Yeah.
But I had to look this up. In the UK, the role is Secretary of State for Business and Trade. That is her role. So she's just another cabinet minister, right? What we thought she was. She was the person overseeing like commerce, basically, right? I really need like a full deep dive into British politics to be more sophisticated. So I'm not getting more into it than that. But basically, they're just referring to her in person by her title. I thought on first watch, they were talking about someone else. I was like, who's the Secretary of State? Like, clearly it's not Lisa Dern, the person who's in charge of business and trade, right? So that was confusing to me.
Yeah, I know.
But so they're basically grilling her and being like, oh, like something sketchy is going on with Tender. Aren't you besties with them? And they're kind of going back and forth on this. And that's really all that's happening.
Yeah. And so the players is basically you have Sebastian, who I believe was the member of the opposing party who we saw speak in episode 1.
Ooh, nice pull. I didn't remember who he was.
I think so. He looks similar. And then the podcaster who doesn't have a pony in the fight. He doesn't have a
dog in the fight.
He doesn't have a dog in the fight. But Sebastian is trying to paint this picture of this coziness between Lisa Dern and Tender. And meanwhile, Yaz is watching this on the television. And this is where we assume she's kind of getting this idea that like, oh shit, what if we were to throw Lisa Dern under the bus? So Lisa and Sebastian go back and forth, but Sebastian accuses her of expediting their license and approval in return for good headlines. And the newscaster makes it clear, he's like, expediting licenses, that's a serious allegation. And Lisa says, do you have proof? Because what you're saying is deliberate inflammation of the normal practice. And basically says that everything that she had done was recorded. And like, she seems kind of like a miserable human being from like what we saw in like the last season. Maybe, I don't know, she's a little more sympathetic a little bit this season because like you kind of feel bad. Like,
she's not corrupt.
She's not corrupt. She has morals.
She's very by the book. And she's like, you know what? This office is what it is, right? Like I think she's kind of supposed to be like a Bernie Sanders, you know, like I don't care about like fluff, how I look and blah, 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 but I'm the voice of the people. But she's been worn down by people more senior than her, our good old friend Ricky Martin or whomever, who
Ricky Martin.
right, whom we'll see again in this episode.
Yeah. So as Sebastian says, look, I know mainstream media hasn't deemed this front page news yet. You see Yaz then go to text Jennifer Bevan saying, listening to Lisa spar with Sebastian on the radio. Let me know if I can be of help. They also had this line that Sebastian says, which is so unfair, I thought, to Lisa Dern, which is like, sometimes when you're shown a hypocrite, all you can do is hand them a mirror. But she has not been. He's just literally inflaming this and like trying to score political points. And so we then cut to Yaz, who is calling Alexander saying, are you in London? From here, we then go to the meeting with Jennifer Bevan, Lisa Dern, and our good friend Ricky Martin, and trying to understand like what's going to be the fallout from all of this. And so Lisa says that they were just doing their job, fulfilling the PM's brief, and talking about how there was a lot of pushback. And actually, Jen, I know you probably can speak to this, having worked at a London-based bank, but post-Brexit, there was, I remember
I worked at a UK-based bank from 2008 until 2010.
Fair. But I mean, I do think that we saw after Brexit, right? That was in 2016. You did start to see people talking about moving out of the UK to be in the EU. And so I don't know if you have any extra color you wanted to fill people in on.
Nope.
Okay, well, then, all right.
No. So the situation that they've set up here is obviously that the Tories were replaced by the Labour Party by a very thin margin, right? That shift in power that happened when we had Otto Mostyn and Aurora and now moving to Lisa Dern and some new prime minister being in power. And so they're saying we're holding on to this razor thin margin because there is this perception of this anti-business sentiment from the Labour Party. Therefore, we were willing to kind of prop up tender to seem more pro-business is just the stakes that they've set up here for, anything.
Which goes to your Bernie Sanders analogy, which is like the Democrats in the US are not really seen as being pro-business. So like if they were to do something that was more business friendly, it potentially gives them a little bit more
broad-based support versus hanging on by a thread to power, which is how they position these guys to be.
Ricky then says, if you think deflecting blames number 10 is going to help your cause, I'd advise a rethink. So I didn't know what that meant. I messaged you, Jen. I was like, did you look this up? And you said that you did. So what the hell does number 10
Number
mean?
10 is just referring to 10 Downing Street. Again, this is not something I knew, which is where the prime minister lives. So it's basically saying if deflecting blame to the White House is how you think you're going to get out of this, meaning like the president, the prime minister in this case.
Yep. All right. So then Ricky says, what's stopping us from calling our own audit? And Lisa says, we can't mark our own homework. I was confused why that, like, I thought that was the...
Well, so I think what she's saying is like, no one would then trust us saying, you know what, let's look into this, meaning that like any investigation that they did with these people at the helm would not be trustworthy because it would clearly be designed to be a cover up. You know what I'm saying? Like they would have their thumb on the scale. But again, Lisa is just so principled that she's getting in her own way. Had she been like, we should call our own audit because it will show that everything that Lisa Dern did was completely above board, that it was others above her who were actually putting her in a compromised position where she was just like, okay, I guess I have to go along with this or else I like will not have any power whatsoever. And like, so again, it's the people standing on principle who keep putting themselves in harm's way by doing stupid shit.
Right. Well, it's interesting that it's like the two sacrificial lambs are Lisa Dern and Henry. And honestly, in both cases, they were not the ones who were actually in the wrong. So it is,
which is HBO, right? It's like the people standing on principle are going to be the ones who get shot.
Yep. I will say, Ricky Martin says, we don't want this self-inflicted bailout. The PM's going to want a name. Basically, they're going to want to throw somebody under the bus. As he leaves, Jennifer is like, I'm so sorry. Can I offer you an apology? And Lisa's like, spare me. We find out that she was actually the one who brought Jennifer into government and has been a mentor almost. And so Jennifer is trying to like, be like, maybe we can ride this out. And Lisa just says, how many off the book meetings did you have with tender management? How many times did they pick up the tab? How often were you at their house, making it clear that Lisa is not going to be an ally for them to get through this together. I mean, Lisa's like, basically, you're on your own and you look worse than I do, which is why we then see Jennifer call Yaz, which is the one smart thing she's done so far.
Yeah.
Like, so she calls Yaz, says she needs to speak, and maybe she wants to go to Norton and Kevin from Red Top, which we later find out.
Top. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that real or is that just made up?
I assume it's supposed to be like the National Enquirer.
So Yaz says, Kevin thinks the prime minister is a Marxist. So we're getting this idea of who exactly this guy is. Jenny says, I think I'm going to need the help of the Norton tabloids. I just want to see how I'm going to land in the fallout. And Yaz is like, you sound a little scared. And Jenny says, I just need to understand my options. I need to be smart. And Yaz says, well, I'm here to help and I can see what we can do. She hangs up. Lord Norton says, sounds like they're scrambling. Yaz is now trying to say, like, well, how do we shape the narrative for ourselves? You know,
for our family.
Initially for our family. Exactly right. So she says, I think we should use the tabloids. We should use Kevin. Norton says he's the right man for the job.
No, he says, the first thing he says is, if we do this, I don't think the company survives. Have you factored that in? Because he has no problem going after Lisa Dern and the government. Like that's no sweat off his brow. But he is starting to realize the deeper implications and what Yasmin is trying to do here.
Yes. She says it's what's best for the family. He says, you keep saying that. Maybe there's no need for me to put this delicately, but may I inquire about the status of your marriage? Yaz says, you've seen my marriage, Alexander. Lord Norton says his behavior, his treatment of you, has it improved? And Yaz says, I'm not saying that I'm blameless. I mean, there are high highs, but the lows are low. He's unfaithful. I know he's an addict, and Lord Norton says, has he relapsed? Drink? Yaz says, definitely booze. I'm not sure about the rest. I know he's a coke user. And then there's heroin, which we did know he did in the prior season. We have not seen him do it this season. Lord Norton is silent. Yaz then, for a point of emphasis, adds often. Lord Norton says often, and Yaz repeats often.
Yeah, as she's telling him about the relapse, you can see her upping the ante as he reacts. So, and he's like, drink? Like, oh no, he's back on alcohol? And she's like, definitely. And he's like, oh no, God, that's so terrible. And then she's like, and cocaine. And he's like, and you can see him just like utterly collapsing inside. And then she digs the knife in and she's like, and heroin. And so I think that she is, and to be fair to Yasmin, I do think that Henry, we saw him with like out at the club. We saw him doing all these crazy things. Like she's not wrong, but she is playing this up to Lord Norton to paint Henry in the worst conceivable light as like he's beyond saving.
Yeah. Although, I mean, it's funny, right back to the second episode where Henry pointed the gun right at Lord Norton and say, I can fucking end you right here. So it's actually in this case not a lie, but she is emphasizing this heroin to make it sound as awful as it can be.
She's doing it for dramatic effect because she's manipulating Lord Norton here.
Yep. So from here, we then go to the tender board meeting. It opens on Henry's face, tender board meeting, and Whitney says, good afternoon, everyone. We want to launch a stock-for-stock hostile takeover of PierPoint ahead of the AGM this week. AGM just stands for Annual General Meeting. This is where shareholders, like actual shareholders, which Whitney, we know, I mean, if it's a synthetic position, like he's not necessarily a shareholder, but that's where they can vote on important things and directives with the company. And so Ferdinand is like tenacious and hop on a flight.
I love your Ferdinand impression, tenacious.
But their stock is rallying, remember? And so they're saying we can use that stock as acquisition currency. Now, by the way, like another little detail that would be problematic for them if they were to actually go through with this. Guess what happens if you try to use your stock in a deal?
Does it go down in price?
Well, yes, but also there is a shit ton of freaking analysis on the company and diligence that is done by the seller. So it's interesting, like in this whole drama with Netflix buying Warner Brothers, Netflix initially had a 90% cash and only like 10% stock bid. They changed to all cash to speed up the process because of all of the extra independent advisors and like theorist opinions. And there's all this like super intense due diligence that goes into an actual merger if you were to do a stock deal. So the idea that they're like, we're going to do the stock deal and then nobody's going to look at us would be like, no, the shareholders of the company that is selling, of PierPoint, would be like, first thing we want to know is what is actually going on under the hood.
Yeah.
And is the stock that is being given to us worth what it's supposed to be? So that in and of itself would trigger a audit because the seller is not going to be like, let's just.
So this isn't the sneaky thing that they think it is. I just figured they were doing this because they otherwise had to hand wave why they have no cash to pay for this company. And they obviously wouldn't be able to raise debt because everybody would be looking at their financials being like, where are the cash flows coming from again? Your acquisitions?
Yeah. But I will say at the end of the day, if this is also just a way to keep the stuff in the headlines, like maybe it doesn't matter. And this was just the PR news story that they needed to like announce this. But I mean, they would have the audit. But, and also to your point, Jen, yes, the share price would go down. But
Yay, I was
right. The board member says, why are we asking for a new audit? We have nothing to hide. Ferdinand now is using this new acquisition as the reason. Like, no, there's a confidentiality issue because of the deal terms.
Right, meaning like you've talked about these SIMs, right? These confidential information memoranda that are circulated when there's these negotiations happening and all these things. So it's like, oh no, now that we're doing this, like we can't possibly, people would be accused of insider trading because they'd want to buy us so badly if they saw this.
I know. The board member says to Henry, you're Whitney's chosen man. Is he making the right call here? And Henry doesn't say anything. And again, you see Whitney snap and he slams on the table and he's like, for fuck's sake, Henry, tell them how passionately you lobbied me for this as our fearless CEO. And Henry just super reluctantly is like, PierPoint's already subject to audit, so we could consolidate post-acquisition and submit to a group-wide audit next year. But Ferdinand looks at Whitney and says, running is not an option. Point of emphasis. So Whitney says, all against. That one board guy raises his hand. Whitney just goes, cool. All in favor? Everyone raises their hand except for Henry, who then just like glaringly is like, reluctantly raises his hand.
Well, and I think it is notable, as we'll see later, that he kind of only raises his hand halfway, that he is like, okay, whatever you say, dude, I have no other option but to do what you're telling me to do here.
Yeah. So we then go on this private plane, or I should say, we then are on Whitney's private plane, and they're
again,
flying.
where he's getting the cash to fund this PJ, like this whole time.
Yeah. So as Whitney's staring at his phone, Henry says, do you ever let go of that crutch? Whitney says, my only vice, well, one of them, if you ever see me without it, you can assume I'm dead. Which I messaged you and I was like, I wish that they had this in a prior episode.
So it wasn't hitting you over the head with it so much?
Yeah, because later we'll see him without it. And it's just like, that was too on the nose.
But it does go back to, as well, the comment that Jonah made about Whitney not actually having any vices and all of his behavior where he's getting everybody else drunk, where everybody else is having sex and he's not doing it or whatever. Like, we actually have seen a little bit into Whitney's vices, if you will, with Henry. But when I heard that line, I was like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yep. So Henry then asks if Whitney has compromising recordings of them.
The threesome with Haley.
And Whitney asks, do you think I'm capable of that? Henry's like, yeah. Whitney says, you answered your own question. By the way, we see the New York City skyline. So we know, by the way, that they're traveling to New York. Initially, I thought, because I wasn't paying attention to like the skyline, so I thought when I first watched, they were going to the Middle East. And then later I was like, it's
to Al Mirage.
Yes. To Al Mirage. The saddest thing is I lived in New York City for 17 years. And I still, my first watch, because I just assumed they were going to negotiate with the people that own the company. So it's interesting that, I guess, yes, you need to go to the CEO, but the CEO
We
is not
also
the
did
owner.
get that intel that like Al Mirage has been quietly dismantling their ownership in PierPoint piecemeal earlier in the season.
Yeah. But I do want to make that other point, right? Which is like the CEO, the person who is running the company, is not the same as the person who owns the company. So on the PierPoint board, you would have a whole bunch of people on Al Mirage PierPoint. Like they would need to basically finagle with them. Obviously, letting the CEO know is number one, but there's multiple stakeholders. It's not just like if you get the CEO on board, like, oh, everything's great.
She can't deal unilaterally with Whitney and be like, okay, if you say so.
Right.
Also, by the way, I do think this was the first time I noticed this. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no,
but
please.
that Wilhelmina was CFO, same title as Whitney, before becoming CFO. And Wilhelmina is this German feminized name for like Wilhelm, right? Like for Whitney,
Interesting.
right? Like she has a man's name feminized and he has a woman's name as a man. So just come back to our names. I had never put the Wilhelmina Whitney connection together, but it was just something that on, again, my second or third watch, I was like, oh, like
I like that.
This is, to your point, even though the CEO can't deal unilaterally, I do think that it would be much more realistic to have the call coming from the CEO to CEO instead of CFO to CEO.
Well, he does later put Henry on and just
puts Henry on for 2 seconds.
Yeah. Wilhelmina says that they're getting a lot of blowback about tender because they do have this partnership ahead of the AGM tomorrow. And Whitney then tells her that he knows Al Mirage is putting them up for sale and that there is a term sheet floating around. Wilhelmina says that's not entirely inaccurate. And
he also says clean structure, laughable leverage ratio. Kristen, what does that mean? Like what? I don't understand what he's saying.
I don't know what the clean structure, I think the laughable leverage ratio, the way that I took that is that their company is distressed. But again, the clean structure, this doesn't really mean anything because of the context of like how it's said. I don't know what they're
Also
trying to
because
say
of what
here.
she says at the meeting about their tier 1 capital.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because I am not an expert, and Jen did a great job breaking down like the tier 1 capital
Did a
ratios.
great job. Jen Googled.
I don't care. You still. So I had in my head, you were like 10%. It's pretty good for tier 1 capital. And when they say they have a 10.3% tier 1 capital ratio, I was like, oh, great. They're like well capitalized.
Because Europe is more conservative than the US. I was like, woohoo. So we'll get to that. But yeah, so I didn't understand what he meant by that. I'm glad that it wasn't like super obvious.
No, no, definitely not. But he says, what are they pricing you at? 1.2 times book with a 90-day clawback window. So last season, we talked about with comps, with these bank stocks, you tend to look at the valuation based on something called like the price to book. So there's the market value of the equity, like where the equity trades in the overall market. And then there is the actual mark to market assets and liabilities of what is on your balance sheet that is done by the accountants. And for most companies and other industries, that number is like a meaningless, stupid ratio because assets and liabilities for most companies are not marked to market, except with banks and then some other industries too. So there it actually means something. And the 90-day clawback window just happens to be like, there's some amount of the purchase price that could be clawed back if it basically gives the buyer some protections if anything kind of like goes wrong.
Got it.
Like earnouts being, anyway. So Wilhelmina then says, you're not far off. They're pricing us to go. And then Whitney
Meaning
says,
we're being sold on the cheap, like when you say price to go.
Yep. And so Whitney then says, Henry has something to say to you. Henry just looks like he's a hostage. He's basically been taken hostage. And Henry just says, Almiraj never loved you and had no idea what to do with you. We could be a transatlantic giant. And so Wilhelmina's like, this is not happening. You guys.
Well, she says specifically, you've got stakeholder optics, governance, a process, meaning, but of course, right? Like it's not necessarily we won't be sold to you. It's just like, you can't just say this and make it happen because that's not how Henry seems to think like mergers work.
Or yeah. So Whitney says, then give the floor to me. And she says, you mean at the AGM, you have no formal standing because again, he's not a shareholder who are the
Here's
people
what
that
I didn't understand is absent Whitney's SPVs, Henry had said, let's make an investment in PierPoint. So that I thought they had made like an investment in PierPoint. I guess no one did this. And then Whitney said he did.
Well, that's exactly it. So I think Henry said we should use this to buy PierPoint stock.
But there wasn't any like actual formal purchase of the stock. There was just Whitney's underhanded thing that he's saying he's doing. Okay, got it. So that's why I was confused because I was like, why did we need this? Because he said, let's go invest in them. I thought they'd been invested the whole time.
Well, no, because I think he had said, let's go do this. That's when you heard Whitney say, that's a great idea. We're going to start making this position. So I mean, he's the CFO. So he's the one who would actually start the wheels in motion.
So I thought they had done it.
Yes. But also, again, it sounds like if he did it, which we found out later he did not, it was through these like synthetic SPVs, which also would not necessarily give him the actual shares in the voting rights that, again, a synthetic position does not do.
And to be fair, you could do a synthetic position with less cash. If you were to go out and make this huge investment in their stock, you would likely need cash or significant leverage to do so. If you're doing it in a synthetic position, then you don't have to have the cash behind the position. You can get massive amounts of leverage if you are doing it in a synthetic position. So maybe that was the whole point.
No, but again, I mean, at the end of the day, like if it's synthetic, you don't own the underlying asset. So that's why you don't.
Although whatever this Porsche thing is, but if there is some way
we need to look into
like
that.
Total return swaps or something like that you can, then all of a sudden it's like, well, you're putting up initial margin of whatever it is. And
I feel like there would need to be some kind of additional clause in the but to your point, it would need to be like the physical settled. So I'm with you. I don't think that because
we need to go do a full podcast episode on the other show about the Porsche deal, and then we'll understand it, and then we can tell you guys.
Okay. So we wanted to actually do a little bit of research into what exactly happened with this Porsche-Volkswagen situation where they somehow apparently used derivatives and synthetic positions to try to execute a hostile takeover. And I think it's important to set out some parameters here that like when you're trying to buy a company and actually gain control, you are going to need to get at least 50% plus of the controlling shares. Now, different companies can be structured differently. So like sometimes you have voting control versus economic control. So if you buy into like Meta, Mark Zuckerberg will always have the majority controlling stake. But with most companies, if you're buying into the equity, one share, one vote. And so you can start to build a position where you actually are able to control what actually happens with the fate of the company. And so what happened with this Volkswagen situation is Porsche ultimately announced that they had accumulated something like 42% of the Volkswagen ordinary shares. And then they built up an additional 31.5% synthetic position in cash settled options. Now, when you and I were talking with this, we were very confused because we were like, here's the thing. Cash settled options, this is giving you exposure to like the delta between where the share price is trading and some reference price. You're not actually receiving the share. If you don't have the share, you don't have a freaking vote. You're just getting the monetary value of the difference. And so getting a cash settled option is bullshit. Like it doesn't do anything for you.
Yeah.
But here was the missing piece that we did not realize. Well, there's a couple things. The first was, I guess that cash settled options can actually switch to be physical settled if the parties agree to that.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, the investment banks who were the counterparties, because if you think about what's happening, you have Porsche or whoever, they're going to these banks and saying, I want to buy call options, potentially, it could be tonal return swaps, there's different ways, but I want to buy exposure to the movement of the share price. If
you're implicitly short the stock because you want the price to go down so that the option you've sold doesn't expire and the money against you.
Yes. And that's the whole thing with like these market makers is while they are selling these options, they need to hedge themselves. Their goal, they don't want to have exposure to like the share price goes up, the share price goes down and like just sort of bet and pray. So what do? They go to the other side and they actually buy shares in the market. And that was what the speculation was, that all of these counterparties that they had executed these cash settled swaps with, or these cash settled options or whatever they had used, were buying shares. It's called delta hedging. So they were buying the shares in the open market, the actual physical shares themselves. So they all owned that. They were staying below the threshold, which was like 3% that would trigger some kind of alert. So that all these investment banks were at like 2.999% each is the amount of shares that they were buying. And then when the actual trade settled, they would then deliver the shares. And that is how they amassed this position. So that was the thing that we were confused about. Jen and I were looking at this. We're like, how did they use cash settled options? It doesn't actually give you shares. So like you don't actually have the voting rights. But that made sense that because of the way that they could elect to be delivered physical shares, that even though they were said to be cash settled, they in fact could switch that at the last minute. So anyway, that's a little deep dive into how those cash settled options worked. As a result of that, there then was additional rules that were put in place that made using cash settled options to do this illegal. So in the case of our friend Whitney, that still would not work. But anyway, quick explainer. That's why we're in different outfits here. All right. So back to the recap of the episode. Okay, so Wilhelmina says you are not a stakeholder of record. And Whitney says, well, we're holding PierPoint stock under a number of nominee structures, which we had talked about. We are an important strategic partner. And I don't have to be noisy about the price suppression or, God forbid, talk about the undeclared sovereign wealth in your recap structure.
So what is that?
Their name is Al Mirage PierPoint. We know
that's what I didn't understand. Okay, good. Glad we're on the same page.
I mean, like, I don't think they could be clearer about it. And so Wilhelmina's like, that doesn't
Well, unless
exist.
It's not, again, I don't think we're given to know which country's sovereign wealth fund Al Mirage represents. To me, it was, okay, if there's undeclared sovereign wealth, is there also like Russian sovereign wealth and Chinese sovereign wealth? Like, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. Whatever. Sanctioned countries.
Fair. So Whitney says, me saying it is almost as bad as if it did exist, or I could leak my countervaluation to the press. By the way, that is literally the definition of a hostile takeover. Like that is a hostile takeover. It is where the board rejects you and you say, screw you. I'm letting it be known. You put out, it's called this bear hug letter, letting people know what is being offered. And then shareholders can. So, I mean, to say I will leak this to the press is by definition, that would be
the hostile part.
That's the hostile part. So he says, or I could say Al Mirage is a distressed seller in no position to make a strategic exit, ties cinder blocks to the PierPoint share price and throw it in the Hudson River, which is like, next to New York. And Wilhelmina says, you made your point. You want to use our AGM to declare a hostile takeover. But again, no, that would be to make an offer. It's not hostile yet. Whitney says a hostile without hostility. I want to offer a premium. By the way, in any acquisition, you tend to expect a premium. It's called the takeover premium, which is usually 20 to 40% above where the company share price is trading.
I just take it to mean I'm going to offer you a premium above and beyond the 1.2 price to book that they're offering. They're being marketing
that they're seeking. Yeah. He says, I'll get you a clean, attractive exit. Wilhelmina says, a halo for everyone's news cycle. And then Whitney says, look for 2 smiles in the crowd. But it literally pans back to Henry looking horrified. And then they're like, making our final approach to Newark was it shows the plane landing. So from here, we then go into the tabloids, Red Top. And there is a sign that reads The Patriot. So I don't know if that's the name of
that's the name of the
tabloid.
Correct.
Got it. They're walking and we see a man. I assume his name is, he's the
Yasmin and Kevin. Yeah.
And he says, sorry about how we covered your old man. Ghastly stuff you went through. And Yaz says, don't worry, he was a bastard. Kevin says, that was the angle that sold, yeah. And this also to me was so interesting because they wanted to pin everything on her last season. Now she's doing the exact same thing to somebody else.
The student has become the teacher.
Yeah. And she obviously has Lord Norton to help her do that. As they walk in, by the way, it also has in the back, it's like Norton News and General Trust.
Oh, yeah. But you also hear off camera dialogue as she's coming in. They say she thinks Princess Di was killed by the SAS, which is like saying that the CIA killed Kennedy in British terms, basically. But also not lost on me that we have been talking about like Diana as Rishi's wife and all our conspiracies about Rishi and Whitney. So I was like, this is fan service here.
Well, because yeah, they named her Di.
Of course,
Literally, yeah. So Yaz says, we're friends. We're a roadmap. Norton then says, you don't need me to tell you how radioactive this is for the government. Yaz then says, Lisa's already feathering her nest. She didn't get to her position by acting impractically. Jenny, did you ever raise any red flags about Tender? And did you feel stonewalls by top-down expectations? Jenny says, well, Lisa was always the cautious one. Kevin is looking at this woman like we can't save her. But Yaz says, Yaz says, see, I'd cut that. This messaging is pretty simple. You were a young dissenting voice overruled by grim, old bureaucrats. Your warnings were ignored. You were principled, youthful, and uncontaminated. Jenny's like, I'm the tainted one. I was at your house. And Yaz says, nobody knows that. I'm not going to tell anyone. Kevin says, if that's true, why do you even need me? The solution's pretty fucking clear. Jenny says, if this goes front page, the company is finished. Yaz says, well, I have deniability. Like, well, this is my situation. I was just one of thousands of employees.
Even though we know full well, right? Her whole thing is like, oh, I was just a lowly employee. It's like, bitch, you were sitting in the executive room when you didn't even have a title and you maneuvered to get yourself as powerful a title as possible. So like,
Yep. Kevin says anything, minutes, documents that can overstate Lisa's case for her proximity to Tender and communicate her passion for it to succeed at any cost. Jenny says lies and Yaz says points of emphasis. And so Jenny, she's like, journalism shouldn't be about like myth making. Lisa brought me into government. This is so brazen. I can't do this. After coming to the realization that she can't go through with it, says this meeting is off the record, right? And Yaz says, naturally. Norton says, we appreciate your, and then he like pauses and says principles. So Kevin then says, we need to find another way to stick it to Dern. And Yaz says, what if we picked it up from another source? Somehow planted somewhere else. Then have it be that that's already public domain. And then when we report on it, now there's no like definition.
We don't need to go through the diligence because we could just say someone else said something. So we got to report on someone else saying something.
Yep. Kevin says these amateurs want to test the media food chain. Yaz says maybe the front page of a red top, like the tabloid, can still turn a minor outlet's work into a full-fledged fucking career ender. And as she walks out, Norton's like, don't sound so excited. I think he's having, I think
he's seeing how cutthroat Yasmin is and is a little bit surprised by it. He's the one who said, we need to go to a proper investigative outlet. And she was like, don't worry. I know just the right thing.
I mean, again, I think that she is good. I mean, granted, it's like she's good at like being bad, but like she's good at this. This is literally like what she was made for.
And this is what like Lord Norton hired her for, if you will, like for the role. You know what I'm saying? Of being part of this machinery. He just never thought it would come to her using it against his family.
Right. But again, with his implicit consent, you know, he's the one who could say no. He could stop it.
This whole episode, I like love Lord Norton in this episode. I am feeling so sorry for him, so sympathetic towards him after always thinking he was kind of like in the last season. Exactly. Now he has been portrayed as this like fatherly figure towards Henry, towards Yasmin. And like Kevin, as Yaz is walking out, goes hard fucking bird. Even this ruthless guy is kind of wowed by how hard Yasmin is willing to go in the paint, you know?
Okay, so next scene, Yasmin knocks on Harper's door and Yaz says, happy to see me, or is that impossible now? And Harper says, I'm more than surprised. Yaz goes, where is everyone? Harper says, it's just me. Yaz says, lonely? And Harper replies, always.
Always.
They start to talk and Yaz is like, oh, I have it on good authority that Lisa Dern and Jennifer Bevan have been in the Norton offices. They're trying to save face and torch each other. Harper says the cover-up is on. And Yaz says, everything stinks. I can verify that the government officials were too close to Tender management. Harper says, I remember Dern introducing Henry at Web Horizon. Also, wasn't Bevan at Henry's 40th birthday? And Yaz is obviously trying to make it so that Lisa's the one under the bus. She says, yep, at Dern's request, but it goes deeper than that. I mean, Dern was always in our offices. The whole cabinet saw her as anti-business, but she wanted to use Tender as an antidote to that, a trophy. Harper says, maybe Diker missed a piece of the story. And Yaz says, no, I think this is the story. And then there was the memo. And so Harper now, like, she sees right through this.
Yeah.
And
the memo.
Like, what memo? And Yaz says, well, Bevan says that Dern told her department to bury a briefing note. Tender represents a risk to the UK credibility, blah, blah, blah. And Harper says FCA, PRA, National Audit Office. And yes,
for us Americans, FCA is the Financial Conduct Authority, which I think is like a cross between the SEC and the CFPB in the UK. The PRA is the one we saw in the meeting, right? The Prudential Regulatory Authority. They're the one who granted the banking license. And then the National Audit Office, I didn't know what this was. Sorry, I looked all these up except for
I did not.
Except for the PRA, which I knew from the prior episode. The National Audit Office, I guess, is making sure that it's the political body that makes sure that public funds are being spent appropriately. Basically, like she's asking who in political power was behind this.
By the way, every season, like the politicians always seem to back the wrong companies. It's like laughable.
Yeah.
So Yaz says, I don't know. I didn't see it. This is just what I was told. And Harper says, well, you bet that political firestorm would speed the end of the company. And Yaz says, your job to bet, not mine. So Harper then is like going through all the things that would happen. She's like, well, questions in Parliament, public inquiry, independent audit of the government's interactions with the company. And Yaz says, maybe a government mandated audit into tender. And Harper's now like, don't fuck me around. Be blunt. Be blunt. Well, what do you want me to do?
Because Harper had said, what is going to be the catalyst for this audit? We need to find one. Yasmin is handing her one on a silver platter.
Yeah. And again, I don't know that she trusts, because if you remember their last interaction, it was literally in the office where they walked in and they said, till the end.
Yeah, so, exactly.
And it's funny, we already know now the switch that has happened with Yaz, but Harper's sitting there like, last interaction we had, you basically said to the end. Now you're trying to end the company. Like, what's going on? Are you trying to snooker me? Screw me? I know snooker is the right word, but are you trying to screw me over? That's what I would be thinking if I was Harper. Yaz says, I'm working on my own escape.
I like how she also said that, though. I don't know how it was written in the script, but I like the way that Marisa Abela said that. She goes, I'm working on my own escape. There's like a long pause. Yeah. And I think it gave dual meaning to that line, meaning I'm working on my own. I'm my own agent here. This isn't Henry pulling the strings. This isn't Whitney pulling the strings. This isn't Lord Norton or Otto Massimo pulling the strings. This is me. And of course, I'm working on my own escape. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that was what Harper needed to hear was that this is just Yasmin coming to her, that there isn't someone else pulling the strings.
Yeah. She says, I'm managing the timing of my resignation, steering people to know that I was the constant lone dissenting voice within the company. Harper says, you weren't though. And Yaz replies, what difference does it make? Our interests finally align. The share price isn't going to tank itself. Get this in front of somebody that they can write about it. Help me help you. Like I said, this was our prediction, which is like so kind of obvious that again, our girls are going to be back together. Like,
yeah. But I will say it is interesting because Harper came to Yaz kind of hat in hand at the beginning of the last episode, trying to protect her. And Yaz is now, she hasn't like eaten crow. She hasn't been like, you know what, I was shitty. She hasn't apologized or anything like that. She's just like, well, now that our financial interests and self-preservation interests are aligned, we can partner together. I don't have to apologize. I just have to give you what you want. Yeah. And then we can partner together.
Mm-hmm. So next scene, Harper goes to meet Burgess from Fin Digest. He's talking about the wake and the eulogy for Jim Diker. Harper says Jim was very honest. I tested him and I know that there was no personal financial angle. And then she says, I heard from someone that warnings were made and ignored about tender. There's talk of memos, a top-down culture of act now, questions later. Yasmin Muck, who ran comms, repeatedly raised concerns again on deaf ears. She's starting to try to protect Yasmin here. Burgess says, she's doing
exactly what Yasmin told her to, right?
Yeah.
Say, I was the lone dissenting voice, dangle this memo.
Yep. And Harper says, no, I'm told they exist. So Burgess is like, what am I supposed to do with that? And Harper says, frame the article as a question. Don't name me, but there's public money tied up in this. Like, be cautious in your wording. And Burgess says, your face does this amazing thing when your concerns become moral. Your eyes soften like you're trying to trick your physiognomy into telling yourself that you actually care about this shit, which goes back to what we had talked about.
Eyes without a face, the person faking empathy, all these things, right? Mm-hmm. He sees right through Harper. Yep. But I think it's so interesting because we've seen this character arc for Ed Burgess, where we went from him being like the fatherly editor in the office who was so unwilling to even have like the non-redacted version of Jim's article go out because he was like, journalistic integrity, we have to do all this. Now Harper's like, somebody told me that someone else said there was a memo. Yeah. So can you release this article? But we see Ed has been so worn down by all of this. He's got the grizzled beard, right? This was just like,
and he's crying.
Digest. Yeah. He's so beat up by everything that has happened with the death of Jim Diker. and everything he's been dragged into with these people, that he's been so beaten down that he's now willing to consider this thing that he never would have done in episode, 1, 2, 3, whenever back.
Yeah. And so he takes this huge swig of beer, which I took to mean like, I'm not doing this for you, friend, like person. And Harper says, I'm tipping you off on a huge story. And then she tries to be like, it's a good opportunity for you to carry Jim's torch. And he goes, Jesus Christ, let's all agree that is fucking grotesque. Don't do that. And it's so interesting. This goes back to the Wrong Way Trade episode in like season 1. It's funny because Harper, like when she is trying to manipulate people, it often doesn't work. Like
she's terrible at it.
Totally see through it.
She's terrible at it.
And same with Yaz. Like Yaz, granted, with sex
They're
stuff,
so
she's very good. But like even this past scene where she's trying to like go to Harper, Harper's like, I know what you're fucking doing. I don't believe any of this shit. Just tell me what you want. And in all of these things, at the end of the day, it does kind of just like come down to honesty. But they're so like they try to manipulate and like they're actually kind of just really bad at it. And they both are. But anyway, he's sniffing because he lost Jim. He did care about Jim. And he says, it's the saddest fucking thing in the world. Harper asks, what's that? And he says, unfilled potential. So I was not entirely sure what that meant. Like, I mean, I assume he's thinking about Jim, but was like,
he's thinking about Jim. I think it has dual meaning. Think about the song from the beginning, Promises, right? Like the promise. There's the promise of everyone. Go back to like season 1, episode 1. Everyone with this belief in the promise of what these people could be. What could Harper have been? What could Yasmin have been? These young people just starting out in their careers with all this promise and potential and thinking about what that has come to, and the way that song was cut off, that this promise is unfulfilled. Yes, although Jim was not a man without his troubles. So I don't know that Jim was this like wondrous reporter. Like to me was thinking much more about Harper, her unfulfilled potential, what she could have become, what she and Eric could have become, what she and Yasmin could have become, what everyone could have been, and where they are, which is here they are. She's got this great trade. Like it does seem like it is going to come to fruition now that this is all happening, but like, is that the reward? So that's what it meant to me.
Yeah, no, I like that. So from here, we then go back to New York and we're in the hotel. Henry is like, it's dark. He's trying to sleep. And Whitney in the other room is zipping up his bag. You see, he's getting ready to flee. He's got his passport. He goes to walk out and someone grabs him and says, not a fucking word. So,
well, the reason Henry's awake and we see him in his hotel room is because we always have this theme of the adjoining hotel rooms that everybody's always in. So Whitney and Henry, who are more of a couple than anyone else on the show at this point, even though they're at war, they have their adjoining hotel rooms, even though they've already like had this sexual encounter together or whatever. And like, that's why Henry's up and he can kind of hear everything, right? He's used to Somerset. He's used to his like fancy London flat. He's in a New York hotel. So you have the sirens and the train noise outside.
I know the train.
Yeah.
So Henry then opens up the door because he wants to see like, what the fuck is happening? And he sees Whitney getting shuttled off saying, all right. So Whitney then gets in the car with some random guy who maybe we've seen him before. I don't know. And
it's some thug.
And it's like Vinay and the thug,
Yeah.
But Ferdinand is Vinay. And so Whitney then, he realizes he's fucked. He just puts his head in his hands and he goes, how the fuck did you know I've been meticulous at every stage? And they say, your dead drop phone, the identical model you often stare at, the one you rarely turn on and the one you take the SIM out of. So we now know what that was. Powered on when you landed and connected with the airport Wi-Fi. And Whitney just was like, fuck, because he knows like he was so close. Yeah. And Ferdinand says that airport is a surveillance choke point. Then he says they were able to track calls to his fixer and then were able to map the flow of cash around the calls. First payment of $120,000 to Sunpath Living Residential Solutions, a Juhatsu disappearing company, which I looked up
in Saitama Prefecture. So this is, I mean, I had to look this up as well. And if this is familiar to you, like God love you, but this is a Japanese word that literally means evaporation. So this is like a deliberate disappearing act that I guess you can pay to do in Japan. Now, what that raised questions to me of, because we get the thug immediately saying these night moving companies aren't real. It's like witness protection. Someone wants to find you, they'll find you. So I was like, wait, so was he not going into witness protection? Why is he going to witness protection in Japan and not using the US CIA? So I'm like, who is Whitney working with that's using is this Whitney's self-directed escape route that he wasn't actually working with the CIA? He's just like formulated his own escape plan. That's what I took this to mean. That's what I took Whitney actually hasn't turned state's evidence or isn't working with some secret government body. This is like Whitney being like, I found someone on the internet who says they can make me disappear, basically.
That's what I think exactly he said. He was
Yeah.
saying that if you had gone witness protection, it would have been fine. He's like, it's not like witness
Well,
protection.
no, he says it's like witness protection. Someone wants to
I
find
had
you, they'll
the
find you.
opposite. Oh, you're right. So anyway, so Whitney then says, just let me catch my flight and disappear. You won't hear from me. Ferdinand says, that's not an option. He then says, while Tinder has a pulse, it remains a very useful data set. So Whitney says, if it dies, I go with it. Ferdinand says, on the contrary, you stick around and face the consequences of your actions without implicating me, which makes it interesting that then later he disappears. I'm like, so hold on. Like, anyway, we're going to get to that. But I thought that this was very interesting that they were like, we don't want you to die. We need you to take the fall, unless they're like,
which is why I
"Henry's a
think he's
better fall."
actually not dead.
Okay. And I agree with that because I was like, it's too easy if he was dead. That like
I think
they
we're
would
supposed
have
to
had-
reason that like he faked his own death effectively
Yes.
to Henry by disappearing off into the night.
Anyway, so the other guy then says, escape is a fantasy. You are only hearing this because I want you to. You no longer exist outside of their tolerance. Whitney then asks, and the journalist, Diker, did you finish him too? Ferdinand says, you learn very fast that compliance is the only logical path. Tender buying PierPoint opens up an entirely new data set. Tender's the future. Tender's real. Tender's beautiful. And you get this like super ominous music. I was like, what is this like?
It's
I
the
mean, is
same
this supposed to
music
be a
from
pep talk?
last time. Yeah,
Yes.
it is like the world's creepiest pep talk. I totally agree. That's what I wrote. They give him the world's scariest pep talk.
I mean, Tender is beautiful. Tender is real.
Also, this guy does like the best Stellan Skarsgård voice impersonation throughout. Like, I love his accent. I love
Is that
his
the dad?
voice.
Is that Skarsgård dad or is that one of the
Yeah,
sons?
that's
Okay.
Daddy Skarsgård.
I love,
That's-
oh, by the way, probably best show on HBO ever was Chernobyl. So
That was a
sad.
really good one.
and,
Yeah,
like-
I thought you were going to say Andor, which also amazing show where he
seen
gave
that
that
one.
speech. There's a
Me
speech
too.
he gives in one of those episodes that like I would argue is like one of the best speeches in all of TV. But yes, love Stellan Skarsgård. He's actually my favorite of the Skarsgårds, which is a tall
Really?
order given there's Alexander.
Alexander,
we
who was
talked
in our
about
Succession.
In Succession, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
And
yes.
True Blood, which is amazing.
Yes.
But anyways, we'll stop. There's so many good HBO shows. We love you,
We love HBO. By the way, back to like Netflix, buying freaking Warner Brothers, you better treat HBO with the delicate love and tender care that it deserves.
We will
Do
come for you.
not- Yes.
I like how you said tender care.
Ooh, I didn't even need to do that. I love it. Yay. Okay. So
By the
then-
way, let's go back to Jim Diker because you made this point.
Yes.
You were like, I didn't think that Whitney knew that there was murder in the weeds. And I was like, how does he not know? You're like, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump mentally. But they really wanted to be like, Whitney didn't kill Jim. Like, hit you over the head with it. So here we go. Whitney didn't kill Jim. So I was totally wrong. I think he knew it was possible. Like, it is shocking
I
to
wonder
me.
if-
Like,
because he says two. So is it that's what happened to the old assistant? And like he knew that they killed the old assistant?
we
Like-
still haven't found out about the damn old assistant.
I
I've
know.
been waiting on this like stupid thread. I think he has assumed that these people disappear people. He is
Yeah.
looking into, you don't look to be disappeared unless you think your life is in danger.
Yep.
So like, I'm sorry, it's like stupid that they're like, oh, so did you kill Jim Diker? Like, come on. Like, hey, so what'd you do with that video I gave you of Haley and the dude? Like,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Okay. So Ferdinand then says, just act like the great lie of your life is not that different from its only truth. You're world class at this performance. I will find the version of you that fucking remembers that. And the other guy then says, go on, like basically get out. Off you fuck, which is a new term I have not heard before. So
Like, fuck off.
off you fuck. Yeah. So next scene, we're in a meeting with our government peeps. And Ricky Martin says to Lisa, did you see the story that ran in Bin Digest overnight? So we know that Burgess took Harper's bait. Ricky says, they looked into and drilled into your coziness with Tender C-suite, and I got pre-publication notice from the tabloids on the back of it. The Norton papers have now picked it up and are going to position you as Tender's chief governmental architect. He then throws down the, I guess, pre-publication tabloid that says minister resigns in absolute disgrace, like APP, like the app. Anyway, I thought that was
Oh, I didn't see that. That's awesome.
yeah, absolute disgrace. He says, not much spin we can put on it. There's tons of visits of you going into Tender's offices. You introduced Tender at Web Horizon. And then they're reporting on suppressed internal risk assessment warnings against Tender's rollout in the UK. Lisa says, prefaced by sources claim because it doesn't fucking exist. because they're just making this shit up. This is the memo that Yaz had like breathed into existence. Ricky says, your initials are on the provisional authorization for the merger, which granted the IBM Bauer deal to go through and for Tender then to get the banking license. Lisa says, but what do those minutes show? The moment you walked into that PRA meeting endorsing it, that's when the deal became done. Funny enough, Norton and his bullshit complex don't mention that. Who else? Which regulators didn't you hit? How many red flags did you torch before those cowards could run them up the flagpole? And Ricky's like, whoa, sounding off make you feel better? And Lisa quotes Anne Boleyn, says, acquit yourself of your charge, for I have long been prepared. It means fuck on with it. I accept ministerial responsibility and I will weigh resignation. Ricky says, like, fuck you, Will. Basically, the PM's expecting your resignation letter. He slams down the letter.
Yeah, she thought she was going to get away with like, oh, like I will humbly accept responsibility and I will do the right thing and I'll weigh resignation or whatever, and then just continue on with her life. And he's like, no, you're out. You're getting shot right now.
Yep. He says, you were always too romantic, Lisa. Lisa says, you mean Secretary of State? He just says, no, I don't, which is so like.
Well, again, which I was so confused about on the first run through because I was like, who is the Secretary of State?
I had the same reaction too. I thought that the Secretary of State was someone else. So I'm glad that you cleared that up.
Well, again, we're just too stupid about British politics. We just don't know.
I mean, honestly, like if this was even me 10 years ago, I would have been too stupid about American politics. I mean, that's the other thing. It's funny. Like, I don't know, in high school, like they never teach you this stuff. They need to teach civics in school.
Preach.
Okay. So from here, we then go to PierPoint's actual meeting. And so Wilhelmina's up there. This is where she's talking about the tier 1 capital ratio that they say is at 10.3%. So back to Jen's explanation. Do you have the numbers in front of you? On like,
no, I don't. I think it was like 10 to 14% or something like that. It was like really good.
Yeah, so it's fine. Whitney, by the way, is just sitting there, hands to his face. And even Henry looks at him and he's like, what's wrong with you? You look terrible. When he says he's not feeling himself. Wilhelmina then says, now as ever, I would like to close my remarks. Whitney and Henry are going back and forth. Whitney's like, I don't think I can do this.
Totally flipped. This is Henry egging Whitney on to do this. And if you recall back to that board meeting when Henry was like raising his hand in favor, we've now got Whitney slumped down his chair. Henry's like having to like physically lift him up to get him to do this. And so when Wilhelmina says any questions, it's like, is Whitney going to raise his hand or not? And then he does the little like, oh God, my hand is moving, not of my own volition. So we have now seen the complete role reversal that these two have gone through, where like Whitney was not willing to go through with it. And Henry is egging him on to do it because he somehow thinks this is going to save him.
Yeah, I was like so confused as to the total flip that Henry had. Whitney makes complete sense, but Henry, I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Like,
well, he's just going along with this because he's like, we have no other option. I guess this hostile takeover of PierPoint is going to save me somehow.
Yeah. So Whitney says he doesn't think you can do this. Henry says he has to. And so Wilhelmina then says, ladies, gentlemen, at this point, I'd like to open the floor to questions. And there's a whole bunch of hands that go up. And Henry says, you need to fucking perform. Whitney, look at me, do the fucking thing you do. So giving him that pep talk. Whitney then puts up his hand. Wilhelmina says, yes, I would like to start with Mr. Halberstrom. Can you kick it off? Any operational insights you'd like to share? Whitney gets up and says, I speak on behalf of myself and our CEO, Henry Muck. This is a homecoming for me, and I would like it to be a homecoming for Tender 2. I don't have a question. Like, he looks like he's crumbling now. It looks like he's about to cry or chicken out or both. Like, his confidence is gone. But then we get the music come in. And Jen, you can talk about the music in a little bit, because initially it like comes in, it's all upbeat and happy. Now it's back to him doing his Don Draper thing. He says, I have an offer. We don't see it as discretionary. It's deterministic. We want to be US dollar natives again. Our offer to PierPoint is 1.9 times book. Peers trade closer at 1.3 times. So again, they were saying that they were going to go at 1.2. The peers are all trading at 1.3. That's actually fair value.
I think it's because PierPoint's such a mess.
Maybe they're trading at 1 or like 0.9 times. So the 1.2,
there's still some control premium in there.
Premium.
But yeah, this fucking company's dog shit.
Yeah. So why the hell the premium? It's a display of the faith that we believe, a marriage of balance sheets, regulatory infrastructure, and the offer is 90% stock. So that's why I literally had written here the whole point about if this was a stock deal, the amount of independent third-party diligence, fairness opinions, analysis that would have to be done. So when a deal goes through, you literally have like advisors on the buy side and the sell side who are looking into all the shit. There's so much that goes into the analysis. And someone says,
and to your point, it's not just about the price that they're willing to pay. If you are a shareholder, you need to believe that the company buying yours isn't a total piece of shit.
Right, because you're taking your shares and saying, I'm now willing to trade the shares that I have of PierPoint for Tender stock. Do you want to be a Tender shareholder?
Yep.
And so that's why there is so much analysis of the buying company and like what it would look like on a pro forma basis, because for the board to recommend this deal, they need to know that what they're getting is not monopoly money, which is what tender is. I mean, this is actually kind of what happened with the AOL Time Warner situation. I mean, it wasn't fraud. It was just over exuberance with what was going to happen in the internet back in 2000 and in 2001, similar to what we saw with AI, like say last year. Now all of a sudden AI is maybe a little bit different, but yeah. So basically you're getting monopoly money, which is why someone says your stock is too volatile. This man shouldn't be hurt. He's not serious. Your company is falling apart. And Whitney comes back as this fake news, which is so, again, US coded, like that's Trump's favorite term. He says detractors have always been on the door from the jump. Too fast, too big, railroad to the internet, the history of industry, which is interesting. They're like, and they've said that before, that industry. Yeah. He says in this country, pockmarked by a slew of disinformation from those who don't stand to benefit from the radical thought or the displacement of worn out structures. And again, this feels so Elizabeth Holmes to me, where it's like this just selling of this story that you know is nonsense. Bullshit.
He's just spewing nonsense.
Someone says more bullshit. And then a guy on the board, by the way, because this is the PierPoint board. So it's like Wilhelmina, and you have a whole bunch of other people up at the podium.
Like the head table at the wedding.
Yeah. And he says, Mr. Halberstrom's offer must be heard. Please continue. So he says,
and he says it with an accent, and we are given to immediately clock this guy as part of Al Mirage.
Exactly. Whitney says the offer is mostly stock for stock. By year one, we expect it to be accretive to earnings. And so just like a little finance lesson here. Please. So when you are thinking about what's going to happen on a post-deal basis, typically people look at the post-deal earnings. And again, bank stocks are a little bit different, but you still typically will look at like, what is the earnings per share? And it's still important in understanding like the value of the stock. And so typically when you're evaluating a deal, you want to look at post-deal, will the earnings per share be higher or lower as a result of doing the transaction? Because if you think about, okay, after this deal goes through, the buyer needs to come up with some way to finance it. It could be through borrowing money via cash, which is not what they're doing, or by issuing new shares. And so on a post-deal basis, you're looking at the earnings per share. So what is that number? And how are you going to get higher EPS? Well, you need to have enough net income from the target. You also are going to need to have what's called synergies, which is essentially a code word for like people being laid off or fired. Because he says through capital efficiency, operational overlap, right? We're going to fire a whole bunch of people. And he says, I will leave you with words that every industrialist has sown into their souls at every point in the last century. We want speed. We want scale. We want certainty. We want America. And then everyone claps. And I'm like, wait, how? Like, this is still bullshit. Like,
it's supposed to be. We have this throughout this show where we have these supposedly like, he did it moments. And we're like, he didn't do anything.
No.
And then it turns out that the music in the background that was playing is a cover of We Can Be Heroes. And so I'm like.
But it does say just for one day, which I thought, like, I love that part. That it's like, we can be heroes, but just for one day. And it's like, you're the hero of like this meeting. But I want to say
you're not.
No, but I want to say one other point too, which is like when they say accretive to earnings, that's accretive to tender's earnings, like to the tender's EPS, not to the earnings per share of the seller. So sure, that's good. And I mean, I guess it means that the
is that good for you as a shareholder though? Because you
because you would own
shares. Yeah,
it's not bad, but this is something we saw and was really interesting with the Netflix deal, Netflix buying Warner Brothers, because what happened is like there was this offer that contained some stock between the time that the offer was made and when the deal closes, the share price can go down. So if they agree to sell and they're now getting shares in a company that's like, even if there's a premium today, there might not be a premium when this deal closes.
Maybe they'll have a collar, Kristen.
Maybe they'll have, but you're accepting monopoly money. It takes time for this deal to close. And so it evaporates. It's literally nothing. It's smoke on mirrors. It's bullshit. Somehow.
So Wilhelmina's basically like, sure, we'll take all this into consideration. And then she covers the mic and goes to speak to the guy from Al Mirage. And initially, without having kind of seen where this is going, I was like, they're just going to do it? Like, this is insane.
Yeah.
And then it on second and third watch, I realized that she's saying something very different to him.
Yep. So from here, we then go to Yaz and Alexander.
This scene broke my heart.
Oh my God, me too. And he says, have you prepped Henry about the headline? Yaz says no. And Norton says, because we both know there's no hope for the company surviving this. Yaz again says no. Norton says, Yasmin, we're not off stone yet. It's not too late for me to slip the page and change the splash. I can stop it running. Yaz says, I don't think that's wise. And Norton says, Henry won't survive this. This is more than tough love. Yaz says he's lived his entire life without consequences, which has been a theme we talked about this whole season. But I said to you, I was like, but for him to face the consequences for this of all things, for something that he didn't do that she got him into, like that ain't it.
I know, but it's the stakes they've set up, right? We are
Yeah.
unfortunately dealt the hand we are with this plot that you and I both agree has holes, but Henry's hit the end of his rope with respect to people being able to back to his we saw Rishi face his consequences again for something I don't think did. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like he didn't murder his wife. He didn't murder Jim Diker, I don't think. But it's this theme of people accepting consequences that basically are the sum of all the parts of their lives, whether or not the thing that is the catalyst for them finally facing the consequences is fair or right or whatever it is. It's like you hit this point where you want to be relieved of the burden of all of the lies you have lived. So like you take whatever you're given. And what Lord Norton is left with is the similar decision that I again, as a parent, this is what broke my heart. I know he's not Henry's parent. Right. He's not even like his uncle, he's his father, whatever. Like, but like,
I mean, technically uncle, but like fought, like not
right. In-law, or whatever. But I just think that as a parent thinking about if your child were to say commit a crime and you knew it, would you turn them in? Or if they were addicted to drugs, would you make them go to rehab? And how you get to that point and over what time? And back to your comment about Henry having the gun to Lord Norton's chest effectively in episode 2. Lord Norton metaphorically has the gun to Henry's chest in this episode and is looking for any way out to keep from pulling the trigger. But I think he knows that like he set up this consequence-free stakes for Henry over the course of his life. And he is in some way responsible for his downfall. And he is punishing himself just as much as he is punishing Henry, because you can see just how awful this is for him.
Right. I just, as a point of story arc, I just wish that it had been like Henry and Whitney had like gone to school together and were old friends, and like he had gone to Yaz and wanted to like join up with this company, and she had some, but it wasn't. It was like she had the relationship with Whitney, and she was the one who was like, "This is how I'm going to save you, is put you in," and it just like got him into this whole hole, and he knew none of it. And I'm with you that it's like this is the punishment for all of like the way that he's treated Yasmin and all of the stuff that he's done that's been just like awful. But I hated that it was for this, you're like, but he was like he was a useful idiot. Like he was the useful idiot.
This is Yasmin taking the fall and being fired by Eric for what Harper did when she was it's the same cycle that everybody is perpetuating. And speaking of cycles, as we're having this, right, Lord Norton is like asking, like, is this loving him? And Yasmin is saying tearfully, yes. And she starts to cry and she brings her hands to her face, and you can see her ring is front and center. And it is no longer the ring that her father gave her. She has swapped it out for a big fancy old diamond. That is the new ring but I think it's not an accident that we see that so front and center. Were it the same ring, I think it would feel a little different and, be like, this is her killing her father over again, but she's replaying that. So I just, it's so awful, and they end the call and they're both just sitting there sobbing separately. They
just acted this so well. Like it was so convincing. And that
Lord
was the
Norton,
thing.
Dude, like what a tour de force performance by you, because they took someone who I viewed as like this kind of.
You didn't like every single, it was so funny. Last season when we would
go through these recaps,
you were like, which old white guy? Like, hold on, who? It would be like, Boston, Norton, like, are they the same person? And we had to call him newspaper guy for the longest time so that you knew who it was.
Newspaper guy.
I know.
I love you, newspaper guy. You've done such a great job worming your way into my heart. And I want to see more of newspaper guy now. Like, give me the Lord Norton backstory.
I know. But I also will add, one other just like random aside, all of these actors have come into their own in such an amazing way and are giving just such an amazing performance. And I do wonder if part of it is like, I wonder if just the actors were a little bit more green. And so, for example, so much of what Harper is doing that is like showing her humanity in these seasons are her eyes, are her facial expressions, are these little glimpses of the humanity, or even like the performance that Yasmin Marissa gave, where it's like, it is so in the delivery. And I do wonder if part of maybe when we were like, again, Harper's a sociopath or whatever, it was because just like there wasn't the same delivery that I feel like is so masterful this season. I don't know. You know what it's like? Because again,
maybe I also think the characters have grown up, like just as the actors have grown up, I mean, it's been 10 years or whatever since they probably started filming, writing, whatever, casting for this show. And we've seen them grow up. And I do think that people become more complex as they age and they become less melodramatic and they are more nuanced.
Yeah. And maybe that's
but
true. Yeah.
I think the writing, obviously,
Everything's
we
gotten so
appreciate
much better.
How well the show has matured and come into its own.
Yeah.
And then I think with actors like Kit Harington, who have so much experience under their belt, I also think that people play off each other so well. And watching Marisa Abela play off of Kit Harington, I mean,
my God.
she is every bit his equal, like acting chops.
Yeah.
She's amazing. So
yeah. Well, I mean, again, all of the
for all
original
I know, by
cast
the way,
has
like
been.
Lord Norton is some like storied Shakespearean
I know.
actor in the UK, and I'm like, who's
up.
newspaper guy? And he's probably like Ian McKellen, you know?
Yeah.
So we cut from this, and I'll let you take back over, but there is this one shot where we then cut from this scene to Henry, and he's asleep on the plane, but the way that he is shot, it kind of looks funereal, that he's in this suit lying down on this white pillow. And obviously we know he's not just like dead, but I don't think it's an accident that we just like cut to, again, he's asleep with his mouth open and he looks dead. Yeah. Like this is his funeral.
Yeah. And by the way, we also hear the drum. Like that goes back to literally episode 1 with the drum when Whitney turned on Jonah and it was like, so we drum. And we see Henry on the plane being woken by the sun coming in. Whitney says, wakey, wakey, rise and shine, we're almost home. And Henry says, bad dream, bad sleep. Whitney asked what it was about. He said it was about his father leaving, people leaving, which is like, I mean, this is literally his family is abandoning him.
But also there's no leaving, no running away. You can't run away from this. And Whitney has been trying to run away and leave Henry holding the bag.
Yes. Whitney says, everyone we love has already started the process of going away.
Which is that.
Yes. He says, I didn't sleep much, been waiting for Wilhelmina to call. Henry then says,
so we're supposed to be alarmed, by the way, that like Wilhelmina hasn't called. And be like, thank you so much for your great offer. Like we accept.
Yes.
It's a long flight.
But also like it doesn't just accept. I mean,
I know, but like, again, in this nonsensy plot, it's, that's what we're supposed to read from that.
Yes. So Henry says, tell me, that Almirage exec who supported you speaking in the meeting, why did he break rank? And Whitney says, maybe he really believes in transparency, Henry. Maybe he used to date Haley. Henry goes, date? And Whitney gets the phone. It buzzes. He goes, sure. I mean, again, his character though has like just done such a 180. Like he just like, doesn't give a fuck anymore. And it's like he was like putting on this act and everything. He's just like, I just don't fucking care.
Well,
like,
now it's all in the letter. Like
everything.
Why pretend?
I don't need to put on. Yep. So he then sees on his phone, Whitney, the Lisa Dern resigning email, and he just goes, shit. And Henry asks what it is, and he tells Henry. They push the business secretary out. Dern's gone. Henry realizes that he got an email from Kevin asking for him to respond before the pre-publication stuff. And by the way, remember, he has this relationship because this is like part of his uncle's freaking
This is his family. But I will say too, again, not to like harp on this too much, but Ed Burgess gave Tender an opportunity to respond to all the claims when they first came out with Jim Diker's article. That's like, and again, having nobody like really wants to interview me that badly, I guess.
Yeah, we've never gotten like an opportunity to like,
we usually just get notified when there's an article that comes out like with our names misspelled. So
it's happened quite a bit.
Yeah. So I thought it was really interesting that Ed totally bypassed the normal procedure, published this thing that then the tabloids took and ran with, but are still going through the motions of giving Henry the chance to respond. Like, so I think that like that was just kind of weird. But then Henry says, "Oh, it wasn't you," meaning
but like also like I mean again that would make sense. It's the freaking newspaper that is his uncle's. So like of course he's gonna be like, "Well, wasn't you?" I'd assume it was him.
But it's there's no out for Henry in any of this. Like,
well,
so
again, I think there could have been. I mean,
it would have been you like committing suicide and taking me down with you. That's the only.
Well, I mean, he could have been informing on the inside and like struck a deal with the Justice Department or whatever they have in the UK.
Good job, Henry, if you had done that.
Right.
But this isn't that. It's
not.
This is, yeah.
But I could see Whitney thinking like, well, maybe he did actually like had a 2 brain cells.
Well, like who would do
together.
this if they weren't committing suicide?
Right. Yeah. So Henry says, what the fuck are you on about? I've got to call Yasmin. Kevin's fucked it this time. And he picks up the airplane phone. Like, I guess there's no signal. And Whitney's just there, calm as a cuke. Like, Henry, relax. The focus is PierPoint. Henry is like, PierPoint? What are you talking about? You can't construct a universe where nothing is real. Nobody can live like that. And he again gets Whitney's face. And Whitney now is just like, you want to know why you can't regulate your emotions? Because you're a fucking child. And then the music comes on that sounds, by the way, like a panic attack because I didn't know the song, which again, I know
I love this song. Yeah, Flock of Seagulls, man.
It sounds like this like drug-addled panic attack in the beginning, the way that it's shot. And Henry goes, shut up. I need to get hold of Yasmin. She can call my uncle. What the fuck? And Whitney then says, I thought you hated your mother, so why is your mouth still attached to her fucking tit? I didn't get that. Did you get that? I've never
Well,
heard
so
him
I've never
talk about
known,
his mom.
and there's never been anything about his mom. But this
Yeah.
goes back to like this again.
Unless
I
it's
think
Yasmin.
well, no, that's what it's meant to be. It's why are you in this infantile relationship with Yasmin? But the way he phrased it, the literal interpretation makes no sense. It's
Right.
just, why are you're such a child, and like you are so attached to Yasmin, and she's the one who has been puppeteering you this whole time. Like, you know, this is why you can't regulate your emotions, you can't do anything, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. But like, I'm with you. The literal words that he's saying, it's like, what? You hate your
Although
mom?
we've talked about this, how I'm like, where's my fucking baby?
Well,
like,
no,
I do wonder if that was
evoking
not
this image of
by
Yasmin
accident.
as the mother.
Yeah.
But I definitely think you're not getting the baby with a Haley. That's
No, I think that's
not-
out, which is fine.
Yep.
But
Yep.
I mean,
It's better. I
wouldn't
think
make
that
sense.
we are given a very specific line by Yasmin towards the end of the episode, which
Thanks,
makes it
yeah,
clear that
which
listen,
you
I think you
totally
have
called.
a good chance at the baby if you. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So next scene, we see someone run up to Jenny, give her a bouquet of flowers. Someone says they were delivered to your private office. She looks at the card and it says, it's beautiful to watch you flourish, you Tory, Lisa X, which is like such a dig because clearly they're the Labor Party. It would be like if you give Bernie Sanders a thing that's like, you Republican, like you MAGA supporter. Like, it's.
I also looked it up because I was just like, what is the. And I actually looked it up when we were recording earlier because I was like, I forgot to look this up and I wanted to. So I was like, is there a political symbolism of red roses in like the British history? And
Yeah.
so according to ChatGPT, because I was doing this while we were recording because I didn't have time to like go and do proper research. So this may be a total red herring, but it does say that the red rose is strongly associated dating back to the House of Lancaster in the War of the Roses in the 15th century. And the combined red and white rose, the Tudor rose, symbolizes unity after the Civil Wars. So remember Kate Middleton also had those roses on her wedding dress?
I don't. I will say that, no.
So because of this, red roses can carry a sense of national identity or English heritage. So I think the red rose is potentially, and again, I don't know, really would have loved to do more research. So sorry, I'm just talking on my ass here. I think the red rose is symbol of like the nationalist, the more like Tory party, right? And that's what she's saying. You're part of like the reds versus the whites, I guess. And like the red top being the conservative tabloid, like the patriot. Like I think that's what the symbolism is there.
Got it. Okay, so that makes sense.
But yeah, 2 seconds of ChatGPT during recording.
And so then Jennifer like looks around, startled by this. From here, we then see Henry march into Tender's offices, trying to call Whitney. Right, he doesn't get through. There's a new secretary there. Henry's like, "Who the fuck are you?" The woman says, "I'm tending. I've been here all week." Obviously, because Haley's gone. Henry asks where Whitney is. The secretary says she doesn't know that he's been in and out. But Henry says, "I go home. No, Yasmin. I come here." And the secretary says she resigned this afternoon. And Henry's just like, "I'm sorry, what?" And he then tries to call Whitney again. I mean, again, he's like super dependent on all these people, like codependent or whatever it's called. So he tries to call Whitney. The woman, by the way, the secretary is like, "The LGBTQ plus delegation is waiting for you." He just like ignores it, which is, again,
I thought that was
such
hilarious.
comic relief. He then tries again, saying, "Whitney, where the fuck are you?" And then he gets a call, and it's Wilhelmina, but she calls his personal phone. So she says, "I owe you the call, not Whitney, given my reservations about his character." No news that we knew she had that. But again, the way that he was talking to her, like I could see her being like, "Who is this fucking?"
Everyone has reservations about Whitney's character.
I mean, yeah, literally, like you meet him and you're just like, "Okay, this guy is off." By the way, as she says this, we then see on the TV, Henry's watching breaking news, Tender under a microscope following the business secretary's resignation. So Wilhelmina says, and by the way, she's eating McDonald's as she's doing this, which
I love that.
Looked up, and you had mentioned this about Harper, where she would always like eat and like do things like casually killing people in the first.
Also, and like Harper's vice was like fast food Chinese restaurants. Like how she went to Panda Express, I guess, like when she had her original meltdown.
Yeah.
But I also love the McDonald's. It's so American coded. And it's also like, I take this for what it's worth. Like, I guess Donald Trump eats a lot of McDonald's. Like,
interesting. Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, we've all talked about McDonald's on the show, and you guys know that I love McDonald's.
Yeah, back to when we were kids and I would go over to Jen's house just so that I could go get McDonald's because my mom wouldn't buy it for me and her mom would.
We got like more texts about like the fact that I love Big Macs and like you used
Yes.
to eat them with me than anything else we've said on the show.
But again, it goes back, and you would mention this about just like the ability, and like in The Sopranos, they would always just be like casually eating as they're like ordering murders and shit. And this is her basically like delivering this like fatal blow. She says, to be blunt, I allowed this little charade at our AGM to jack up our sale to Temasek. It's been in the works for some time, and Whitney's proclamations about our valuation gave me a little leverage for the final negotiation.
And for those of you who don't know, Temasek is a Singaporean bank.
Yes. So Wilhelmina then says, I haven't spoken to him, but I hope he realized his yarn about buying positions in PierPoint was a bluff. I called his supposed intermediaries, and there are no term sheets, no interbank confirmations, no capital. There is no record of it at all, nothing. Because by the way, if you actually do enter into a derivative contract, we literally just saw this with what Stern Tao had done, but I mean, obviously that wasn't a derivative contract, but still, when you enter into these derivative contracts, or if you are doing anything synthetic, you do have to post collateral because again, as the position moves, there are these margin accounts because when the position moves, the bank has to know that they have the money, the capital, so that you will be able to pay for what is owed. Like I keep saying, if the position moves. So there would need to be, again, the term sheets, there would like the ISDA, but again, I think that's in the US, but yes, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into this.
Yeah, and that's for direct facing derivatives contracts, and those derivatives contracts are now cleared through clearinghouses.
But so I feel like if you're building this like massive,
it would be even easier to source probably, like for anything that isn't like too crazy. But the bottom line is like we've done all this mental gymnastics trying to figure out how this was done, and it wasn't done. So it
was nothing. The thing was nothing.
The thing was nothing. Exactly. So thanks for joining us on this journey, guys.
Yeah. So she says, snake oil and sermons sound similar, don't they? We will all be monitoring the tender fallout closely. If your equity continues to crater, we will trigger the conversion on your bond. No, your bond is a bond. You are not going to convert it to equity if the stock craters. And then she says, we are pursuing full recovery so that our institution doesn't suffer, which Jen, your favorite line every.
But like, I actually hated it here. It was so forced. I was so annoyed. Yes, to your point, we've been talking about, originally we were talking about a COCO. Then all of a sudden they were talking about a puttable bond. Now we're talking about, again, if we're talking about a puttable bond, this is correct. If we were talking about this is 100% what she would say if they had a puttable bond. It would be, if we have a puttable bond and like you guys can't freaking pay us back the money that we are owed because we are exercising that put option.
But like you wouldn't say it's going to trigger the conversion. I feel like you would say we're gonna exercise the put.
We're going to exercise the put option because they keep going back to the language of the COCO, which they are wedded to because that was the original stakes that they put up. Yeah. So it can't be, if your stock gets so low, we are going to trigger turning it from a debt function into an equity function where now we own your shitty equity.
But anyway, so she also says, and we will be pursuing full recovery so that our institution doesn't suffer. By the way, here's what would happen. Tender is going to ultimately have to go into some kind of restructuring, Chapter 11 or liquidation, Chapter 7, whatever. There is a orderly process of who is getting paid back first, second, third, first. I mean, again, Jen was working at Lehman Brothers. She had her lovely little Lehman pension. But if you are a debt
I got it 10 years later.
10 years later. And actually, when I was working, I was at a firm that did training for Lehman Brothers. And they literally, it would be like every year, they were like, we got another 12 cents, whatever. I mean, it wasn't 12 cents.
12 cents on our like unpaid invoice.
Yeah. Because there was like, again, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars of unpaid invoices that, again, you then get in line. But in the seniority of these various bonds, like it's senior secured, senior unsecured, senior blah, blah. Like there is a whole proceeding. And this, by the way, if you're interested in like how that all works, check out our episode with Michael Gatto of the Credit Investor's Handbook, our Distressed Debt Investing 101 episode. It's great. But like there is a whole process. It goes through the courts. It is this whole thing. It's not just like we're going to be fulfilling full recovery. Like, of course you are. That's like assumed. So anyway, sorry, I'm getting like all up in my high horse and being like, again, I love the show and I feel so bad getting all like snippy and like uppity about stuff, but anyway, this is what we live for. So,
well, to be honest, this just was way too heavy-handed.
Mm-hmm. So as she says this, she says, institution doesn't suffer. Good luck. Hangs up. Henry calls Whitney again. And then you hear the phone buzzing from his desk and he picks up the phone and he like looks terrified. But that's when I said to you, and I think when you finished, I was like, it's just so not the writers to have left that nugget in the same episode, like so close, like it should have been in episode 1 if he was really dead. So that's why I said to you, I was like, you're supposed to read into this that he's dead, but like that seems too easy. I feel like he has to not be dead because like
he's either dead or, again, because if he's dead, the only reason that the KGB would kill him is A, if he tried to run, or B, if this whole thing with Tender has fallen apart and he's now no longer useful to them, and like,
but they still wanted him
too much.
But no, they literally, Ferdinand said, because he said, oh, if Tender dies, I die with it. And Ferdinand said, no, I need you to take the blame and make sure that nothing is on me. So they needed him. The only thing is like, if somehow Henry is now the useful idiot and they know they can like rely on him, but I don't.
Idiot. That I think is it. But again, Henry knows him. It's all very easy to be like, the KGB was behind this. Ferdinand's the bad guy. Like
I'm scared. Yeah, I'm scared. Which again, Henry was scared. I mean, Whitney was scared.
Whitney was scared. So we are given to read that Whitney has either run away, which is the song playing in the background, which we knew he was trying to do.
Oh, so then in that case,
that's the flock of seagulls song that's playing in the background, and Whitney saying to Henry, everybody in our lives that we love has already begun the process of moving away from us. Whitney is about to land in London and get the fuck out of Dodge.
Yeah.
The only question is he going to do so and escape the KGB coming after him for trying to run? Or, and again, at that point, they're only willing to do that if they know that this Tender thing is not going to do what they want. And they're not going to have access to PierPoint. And they're not going to have their people and all this stuff. It's just going to go down. Yep. So, or he has just simply fled to the province of Japan, where he's going off to hide with whomever he is working with. So,
or he got the idea to go actually talk to the freaking US and like get into witness protection. But yes,
which by the way, he should like go to the American government with this. But although the American government's not going to care because now they no longer have anything to do with PierPoint. So like, what problem is it of ours other than you're an American citizen in London who has found themselves in quite the pickle?
But we would be American citizens, so maybe it's. But yeah, I'm with you. So anyway, from here we then go to the next scene. Jenny is in the car driving somewhere. Yaz calls to check in to see how she's feeling. And Jenny asks if she actually listened to Dern's resignation speech. And Yaz is like, no, I'll get the highlights on Twitter, which I thought was interesting. Like, I feel like these days it's usually more like I'll get them on X or also, sorry, Twitter is gone, by the way. Like Twitter is now X.
We still call it Twitter though.
We do. But I would have thought she'd say like, I'll get it on TikTok. But anyway, so Jenny then says it's full of provocations, spares the PM. I mean, sentences carry about as much weight as the Tender press release, if I'm being honest. And Yaz then says, listen, it's yesterday's news. I mean, it's tomorrow's, obviously. Well, good luck with your television appearance. I just like laughed at that where she's like, it's yesterday. No, actually, it's tomorrow.
She's like, already mentally moved on, even though like this headline hasn't even broken.
Yeah. And she then is like, such bullshit. She's like, it's a vote of confidence that the PM wants you to be the front face of this. And she then says, call me after so I can help drive the rest of you communications.
The PM wanting her to be the face of everything. Let's not forget who manipulated the prime minister into wanting Jennifer Bevan in the first place when she like got that. It was the Norton and Mostyn machinery. So like they have now in their back dealing continued to elevate Jennifer within government because they think she's their agent because they got her the get out of jail free card by shooting Lisa.
Yes. Jenny asks, how much did you know? And Yaz is like, about Tender. And Jenny says the leak to FinDigest that catalyzed the whole Red Top story. Was that you? And Yaz says it doesn't help you to know. Jenny says, you had no fucking right. You know this is crashing down around. Yaz says the right people will survive. And Jenny says, I've only ever seen the sunniest
By the way, the right people will survive, meaning you and me, not my husband.
Right. And she says, I've only ever seen the sunniest version of your disposition. And I increasingly wonder if it's because I only ever acted as you designed. Yaz says, by the way, with a wine glass in hand, so we know she's not pregnant yet. Because I actually said to you, I was like, why is Norton going along with this? Is it possible that like, she's promised him to like have a kid? Because he was so focused on the heir thing in the last season. And that's why I'm like,
but she has become his heir. But yeah,
I know, which actually I like kind of love for her because like she like her dad was so effing terrible.
And he's the dad that
but he has daughters. Like that's the other thing. Like I feel like
I know the whole thing was that like he wanted the reason he values Henry so much is because he thinks of him as a son that he never had. What does he need with another daughter in Yasmin?
Right. So that's why I was like,
although I do think I have come to read him so differently in terms of what he did with Yasmin that like he actually seems the Lord Norton I've come to know and love versus Newspaper Guy. Newspaper Guy was just like manipulating Yasmin to get what he wanted for Henry and like what he wanted for like the family succession plans. Lord Norton that I know and love is trying to right the wrongs of Charles Hanani, whom he feels guilty for having like implicitly underwritten all of his wrongdoing by like his implicit support of this guy who he knew was getting away with murder. And I also think, to what extent too is he punishing Henry in a way that he's like punishing Charles in a way, which is so wrong and
which
unfair.
is interesting. Yeah.
But like,
because they're like kind of stand-ins for each other a little bit. But anyway, I was like, maybe he like finagled a son out of, or you can't like choose the gender, but like maybe he finagled like another kid out of it.
The second we finish recording today, we are both going to watch the Susan finale to find out there's a freaking baby.
Yeah. If freaking Yasmin's character is not pregnant and there's not a freaking baby, I'm going to be angry. And again, Jen has like another reason why she thinks that might be the case. And so we'll let her get to that in a sec. Okay. So Jenny says the real cancer in politics are the pig shit lightweights without a real belief except for their own self-advancement. And Yasmin says, you knew what you were getting into when you took that meeting. You got exactly what you want. And I have been a genuine friend to you. Now, I think this is so interesting. I actually wonder if she really thinks that they're friends, similar to how she wanted, like, poor Yasmin just always wants friends. Like she really wanted to be friends with Harper. And now it's like, Jenny, they're using each other and like she's manipulative AF and all this. But like, I actually think deep down, she's like, wait, but we were friends. Like, I want to be your friend. You are my friend. And it's so funny because again, I was like, she's manipulating her, blah, blah, blah. But like, no. I mean, yes, she is. But she also like wants to be her friend. The same way, like
that's how Yasmin shows love. It's control and dominance. So she was like, "What are you talking about? Of course, I like you. I used you as my pawn. Our interests are aligned. That's what friendship looks like, right? Because of the toxic world that we have come to live in, where like interests being aligned is the only currency of friendship that Yasmin knows at this point."
Yep. Jenny says, what fucking friendship? This has been a marriage of convenience, but I suppose you're used to those. Yaz says, you know nothing about my marriage. And then we get the song from the beginning that cuts back in, the promises that you said that like got cut off and now it's back in. Jenny says,
the song starts to play during this conversation about this failed friendship.
Yes. And so we hear Jenny and she says, I know your husband is an addict and I know you deserted him to his ruin. You abandoned him when he needed you the most. So you take that for a fucking dance around your conscience. So she knows that this is true. She throws down her phone. She's pissed off, but like, she literally, I mean, she does feel guilty. And I still, back to like the question we asked ourselves in the beginning. And I do think she loves Henry, even though she loves herself more. So she's going to save herself. I still don't see why she couldn't have saved both of them. But I think to your point, he was so terrible to her. And I do think she probably just wants out of this marriage too.
Actually, I don't think he like, I mean, I think he, by choosing Whitney over her effectively, authored his own demise. Like if he had not gone on benders, relapse, falling into Whitney's arms, then there could have been a path to Yasmin and Henry continuing this marriage of convenience with some semblance of love. Mm-hmm. But her love for him, I think she feels awful about this. And I think you can feel awful about doing something horrible to someone without having genuine, deep love for them as well. And so now we have our song Promises that got cut off so abruptly at the beginning, or the promise rather. And then it keeps playing and we start to get the chorus that we'd missed as it goes to the offices of Stern Tao. And I think, that Yasmin had thought that there was a promise implied by Jenny. I do this for you. You do this for me. I have a continued path to power and influence because I'm going to be the comms director for this woman who's now ascending to political primacy in Lisa Dern's place. Like that's the implicit tit for tat. And Jenny was like, nah, my principles matter more than whatever dealings you think we had. We're not friends.
Right.
But the promise kept is instead the promise between Yasmin and Harper, as we will find.
Yep. And so we see Sweet Pea, Kwabena, and hear Harper on the phone. She says, thank you so much for letting me know. Speak spoon. And she says the Burgess has let her know that there's going to be a big story in the tabloids that the Serious Fraud Office are announcing their investigation in the afternoon. Like, is that real? The Serious Fraud Office?
Serious Fraud Office. Absolutely.
So funny.
That's and
sounds like fake. It sounds like a Bond villain.
Those are the same people who prosecuted the LIBOR scandal.
Oh, interesting. Mm-hmm. So Sweet Pea says government just mandated a 166 skilled person review into tenders compliance and risk controls, and the FCA are instructing PwC. So PwC is one of the big four accounting firms.
And a section 166 skilled person review, thank you so much to Google, is it's basically where it allows the regulator to require something like PricewaterhouseCoopers or whoever it may be, but like a third party to review specific aspects of its business and report back to the regulator. So it can be like governance and controls. It can be risk management. Again, this is all per Google. Client money handling, anti-money laundering, so AML, all these things, right? So basically, they have gotten the independent audit that they always wanted, and it's been authorized by the regulator.
Yep. Quavana then says stocks indicating to open down 77%. And Sweepy says no one wants to catch the knife. So it's like the catch a falling knife. Tomorrow we hit the tape small. Don't show our hand and exit as efficiently as we can. Show me the dollars, which is smart because in theory, you would expect there would be this like whole bankruptcy proceeding and it could go to zero. But if I were Harper, I'd be like, I just got screwed last, like my PierPoint short.
Time to take profit.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like,
and so just for those of you who are not familiar with how a short works, again, remember they have sold the stock that they borrowed from somebody else. They now need to go buy it back. So what she's saying is they want to basically come in small and cover in tiny little pieces rather than doing it all at once and moving the market against themselves, because that will actually push the stock price up. So they're going to strategically go in and buy back little chunks as the market opens and probably, leave a whole bunch of orders with different dealers and stuff like that. So they're calling a PierPoint or they're Kenny, I guess, like to go in and cover.
Yep. Harper looks down and sees Yaz calling. Sweepy and Quavana then have like kind of a very like excited interaction similar to how they did in Ghana. Now, so then this like kind of last scene, they're at a bar and Yasmin says, you must be levitating. Harper says, ironic, I'm here with you. Yaz says, you used to make me feel very alone. Now you're the only person in the world I don't feel alone around. Harper says, I didn't want any of this to come at your expense. And Yaz says, it's kind of everything you've always wanted, really, isn't it? Me like this and you like that. And by the
way, this reminded me so much of Real Housewives of New York City, that old like Kelly Ben Simone, Bethany Frankel feud, where she was like, I'm up here, you're down here, right? And Yasmin saying, I'm down here, you're up here. Isn't this what you've always wanted?
Yep. And Harper says, it's true, it is. But Yaz looks at her and she smiles because like she doesn't care. So then they laugh.
No, I think it's like we're finally being honest with each other. She's so like, finally, we can stop lying
and
to each other.
They can start saying what's true.
Yes, exactly. And by the way, in the background, we get Enya again. We get Only Time. I freaking love Enya. I love this soundtrack so much. We need to make an industry soundtrack on Spotify together.
Done. Yaz says, thank you for your honesty. And she says, I mean, seriously, how the fuck did we get here? Harper says, the fuck if I know what drives anyone anywhere, lack and need. And then Yaz says, well, we have said this whole time. She says, I'm so jealous of you. I am. You are smart, you know? And the way you wear it, you have this command, this autonomy. I'm so fucking soft. And Harper says, I don't know how to say this without, I would do anything to live a day in your body and just see how the world opens up around me. I really resented you for being a breathing example of how I was less. And Yasmin says, I choose to love you for being a breathing example of how I can be more. But I think it's so interesting because, I mean, the world of industry, it operates in the UK, which is a world that Jen and I, we are not really that familiar with. And even like back to season 1, it was clear that class was higher than race. And you saw that with like Gus versus Robert. Like Gus, who was Black, his parents were, I mean, I looked this up. They were the Ghanaian ambassador to Angola. And he had access that someone like a Robert did not. And especially last season when Yasmin was ruined. Like she was the bottom of the bottom. She was like below, like nobody wanted to be associated with her because she was going to be framed and take the fall for her father's embezzlement scandal. But even when she was with Henry, people were talking about how she like basically didn't belong, that she was lesser than, that people were still looking at her as being lower class than Henry, who was, I assume, like kind of born into some higher status family, whereas like she was lower. So I just thought that that was so interesting that it does seem like, and especially for them as like outsiders, like Harper is an outsider being an American. And so she doesn't really operate in that class system in the same way, is my understanding. Like you're an outsider and like you don't know the culture, but like they kind of view everyone as just like they're Americans. She still has the ability to go. I mean, she's literally like running a hedge fund that has now made a gazillion dollars. She's been able to leverage her brilliance and people have seen it and they have rewarded her for it. And I think if anything, I mean, Yasmin was in all of these rooms and people were like, why the fuck are you here? I mean, we saw it in like every single episode with like her going into the room, being in those executive meetings and people like, why the fuck are you here? Like, who are you? Like, oh, you're Cobbs now? Oh, you're so overpromoted. So people weren't opening up to her and giving her this respect that I think Harper assumed she had. And it's interesting that Harper had this perception that she had that. Meanwhile, Yasmin has always been like trying to show how smart she was. And while she did have access to some of the rooms, it's like she had access to the rooms because Henry gave it to her and almost like rescued her in season 3. But I don't know. I mean, what did you bring from that?
So it's funny because I think what you're implying is twofold, right? That part of this is about race in a way that we didn't think it was before this. Yeah. I think that there's been this is it or isn't it about race at some points? Because I think you could look at the lines of this conversation, and if you didn't know the race of the two women having this conversation, you'd never interpret it to be about race. You would interpret it to be solely about class. I do think that race has to do with it. I remember when Yasmin was penniless at one point and goes out to brunch and dines and dashes with Vanita, right?
That's a good point.
I think like so much of the implication there is that she's allowed to get away with these things because of what she looks like, how she can act, what she can represent.
Yeah.
But I think what you are getting at is that fundamentally at the end of the day, they both see something in the other that they perceive themselves to lack and want that, where in reality, that is the thing that has ultimately not panned out the way that each of them has hoped it had. Yes, Harper is smart. Yes, she has the great trade idea, but Otto Moston just used her as the modern face of his fund. And the great short idea that she had was actually always obtained through like all these illegal ways and stuff like that, through like her dirty dealing and things like that. Yes, she ultimately got to the place where it was in fact true. But as you said last time, that was actually luck. That wasn't necessarily her brilliance. We do know for a fact that Harper is brilliant. We also do know for a fact that doors open for Yasmin that wouldn't be there. The access to Henry Muck, the fact that everyone wanted to put her in this position in the first place, to be in the position to marry Henry Muck, to get this access, even when things were crumbling around her, that was always a get out of jail free card for Yasmin that was won simply through her status in society that like was an accident of birth. So I think that they each have this perception that the other has something that they want and wish they had. And that's what drives their own insecurity. But the reality is they both are up against the same shitty things that each other is. So they always just been allies and not been jealous and bitter towards each other and constantly trying to knock each other down. And isn't that like the story since the dawn of time, especially about female friendships, right? That so much of what makes female friendships go wrong is this perceived zero-sum game. That we're each competing for the one seat at the firm or like the one guy or whatever it is, right? The Robert of it all back in the day, that it was like, oh, Robert's always going to choose me over you, right? Like these silly things that they have thought of at the end of the day where the stakes keep getting higher, but it's the same story since time immemorial about what has women competing with each other. And I think once they realized and everything is stripped away, that they are not fighting for anything, that they are just two sides of the same coin, then as the scene progresses, as they're being increasingly honest with each other about what they saw as their lack, they are touching each other and like they're holding hands, and Harper sees Yasmin starting to crumble and grabs her shoulder. And it's back to actually like the way we saw Whitney and Henry interacting like intimately. And then what Yasmin says finally is she says, I just want to be necessary. I've never been necessary. And Harper says, where does that come from? The need for control or the desire to dominate? Is it so you can say you were never at anyone's mercy? Yasmin says, I don't know. And she starts to cry. And she says, I guess I just kind of grew up at someone's mercy. And Harper looks moved by this. And this is to me the nugget that I think, I know you're rooting for the baby. I think this is Yasmin confronting what her aunt told her in episode 2. That she was nearly aborted, but she was allowed to live at the mercy of her father for the most nefarious of reasons. And that she wants to be necessary to someone else. And we have seen that throughout her interactions. Like she wanted to be valued for her work at PierPoint. She wanted to be valued by Henry for dragging him out of his suicidal. She wants to be necessary and valued. And I think in your suspicion that like she could potentially become pregnant or discover that she is, that at the end of the day, what could be her path to being necessary at this point? Because Jennifer Bevan doesn't need her for a comms director. Well, Henry doesn't need her for a wife or whatever. That she could be necessary.
But even like for the Norton empire, if her and Henry divorce and there's like a prenup, now all of a sudden she is no longer family to Lord Norton. I get he probably has like a soft spot for her, but that's still not the same thing as being family. Now, if she actually has a child that is Henry's, again, I'm assuming Henry is somehow going to die. I think whether it's suicide, whether I don't know. I don't think anything good comes to Henry at the end of this season. But so what is the thing that keeps her kind of in the mix and makes her necessary and keeps her necessary? It would be a kid. So that's why and look, between you made the point about like, you don't take a gun out in like episode 2. They had all these things about her being possibly aborted, about Henry saying, I wish I wasn't born, about
this mother
baby,
thing too.
The
like,
mother
just
thing.
Like the mothering
mommy,
of Henry.
Even the mother,
thank you, mommy, all that stuff. So I'm with you. I think that they have opened the door here to indicate that which by the way, us as two women having this conversation about the only thing that would make this woman necessary in the world is becoming a mother may sound like super anti-feminist or whatever. It is the position that Yasmin has gotten herself into through all of her like machinations and doings. Like this is not the world doing this to Yasmin.
But it also goes back to what we had talked about when I said, like, in last season, that there was so many hints dropped about like the son, like congratulations on the gender. And I was like, dude, like what the fuck? And you were like, remember, this is like the monarchy. It operates differently than the US. Obviously, we don't know everything about the UK, but like this idea of legacy is still a huge important thing. And so it's not so much that it's really necessary if she's a kid, like not at all. It's just that in this elite culture, in this class that she had become disgraced out of, saved by Henry, for her to only stay in that class is through a kid.
Yeah.
So Yaz says, do you want to go out, do the things that Lord sings about? And
but by
Harper
the way,
says,
this is the most like millennial women coded. Like maybe this is Gen Z too, and I just don't know it. But like this is exactly what would happen if I was at a bar crying with a girlfriend and be like, oh, I'd be like, do you want to go out? Do you want to go dancing? Do you want to just get drunk?
Because apparently, like Gen Z's been drinking less alcohol. Like as millennials, that is not it.
And listen, everyone in the show is definitely not like teetotaling.
But she says, Lord sings about being 17. And Yas says, exactly. God, I was still 17. It was so easy to get people to do things for you. And she then starts to cry. But also, like, literally, you could not pay me to be 17 again. Yas then says, will you promise me something? Will you look after me tonight? And Harper says, when the fuck are you going to look after me? And Yaz says, tonight. And then they go to a club and they're like dancing.
Well, so this is the promise, right? That's the promise from our song that they have made to each other. And so this is the ultimate promise. But it's back to what you said about the clarification from the song Heroes, that it's just for one day. This is just for one night. She's not saying, I'll look after you always. She's saying, I'll look after you tonight.
Yeah.
And so I think, and then, by the way, we cut to them dancing with our Daft Punk song from the beginning that we never got beyond the opening chorus.
Well, that's where the cutoff from Henry.
Reverse order. Yes. Yeah. We've had the reverse order of the promise filled that we got cut off. And now we've got the Daft Punk song that was playing while we faded from black. We get the whole thing while we see them like dancing, holding each other. Looks like they're kissing a little bit.
But like in a like not like it's like not really like a
it's not
sexual way. It's like just like we really love each other. We are so close as friends. Like this is the closest we've ever been as friends. But like they're like hugging and like, and then to your point,
to me, I found this scene. I had read an interview or watched it on TikTok as a clip. Like, let's be real, who is reading interviews? I don't even remember what it was, but it was Myhala saying to someone who was like, when are we going to get like the end game of it being Yaz and Harper? And she was like, well, let me ask you this. Would you rather we gave it to you, you see it once and then it's over and then what? Or would you rather we continue to dangle it and it's kind of you filling in the blanks with your mind? And I was like, that's so aptly put. That's exactly why the show is so successful. They dangle this, but they never get, well, then they gave it to us. And I was like,
but then as they're sitting there smoking, Harper says, you have no idea how good I feel right now. Yaz says we're here forever, even if we can't be. And so I just like,
it's just for one night, but also the way they have the composition of that scene, they're still at the club. They're in like the hallway to the girls' bathroom or something. I don't know where they are. It's like, it's this weird setup.
Maybe they're in line for the bathroom. That's a good point. Maybe they're in line for the bathroom.
I don't know where they are, but they have Harper sitting up, but like reclining, smoking a cigarette, and Yaz lying on her, smoking a cigarette too. The way that two people would be composed in bed, post-coital, smoking a cigarette, classically in the movies, right? That's kind of how they are positioned here in the aftermath. And so we are given to think that this will not last, that this is a temporary peace, love, whatever, and that's fine. But I almost wish they hadn't given it to us so much. You know what I'm saying? Like I actually would have been cool with them just dancing and like it was just, and then, you know.
Yeah.
So to me, it was like just a bit too, they gave us too much fan service, if you will.
I will say it's so funny how like episode 6 could have been the finale. This could have been the finale. I'm so curious what they actually do with the finale.
Well, and again, remember with the name of our Daft Punk song being To What End? Here we go. We're going to the end. This is about to be
end?
Exactly. This is about to be the end of the episode of the season. This is about to be end game for whomever. I'm so excited to see where we go. And I think as we've gone through this episode, as so often I find, I have softened on my harsher critiques of the episode.
Same.
This was such a plot-driven episode. There was a ton here. I think I very harshly said to you after watching, I was like, this episode could have been an email, just because it was like so much driving platform. And it did feel very heavy-handed with like the hostile takeover, but it isn't. Like nothing actually really happened.
Well, Jen was funny. She goes, this will be like an hour recording, and then like started to schedule some calls. And I was like, Jen, no. And we're literally coming on 2:30. Now it's not the 4 hours that we did last time, but it's still not under an hour.
Not the 45 minutes. Yeah. All right. So heading into our season finale, who are we bullish and bearish on?
I mean, bullish on Harper. Like she is, up huge. I'm so curious to see what she does with it, but I'm still very nervous about her having the lack of guardrails, because we know that she likes to make self-destructive decisions. And again, there's been this massive theme of consequences, and she keeps trying to do the wrong thing. And there have been no real consequences for her, except for back to, like I said, the season 2, when she gets fired from PierPoint, but like purely for something that was like, again, like not really her fault, which Jen would have. And you were like, this is the stupidest thing. But
it's the same thing, right? Everyone always faces consequences for the thing that is not the thing.
Yeah. So I'm very I'm bullish on her, but I also am not, because again, it's HBO. So there's no way that
we can't possibly have happiness.
Good.
The only reason we have the happy ending for our two main principal characters is because it's the second to last episode. So we know it won't last.
I know. And then honestly, I would say I'm bearish on Yaz, because but I still waiting for my baby. And then
bearish on Henry, right? Yeah,
Henry, and possibly Whitney. We might be dead in a dead.
I think
we don't know.
I didn't think we were seeing any more of Whitney after the last episode. I very firmly don't think we are seeing any more of Whitney after this episode.
No. So
I think
we'll
Whitney.
See.
Good job, Max. You did a great job with this character. Well played.
Maybe he'll have a cameo in a subsequent season.
They always bring everyone back.
We did say we were very disappointed that there was not enough Cal Penn. We thought we would get more of him, and he would be more of a character, and he just is
I didn't realize it was featuring Cal Penn.
I know. So hopefully he comes back in a meaningful way. But we love this.
We're still waiting on Eric and Jesse Bloom.
Yes. But so if you have found this helpful, please leave us a written 5-star review, or subscribe to our channel if you're watching us on YouTube, and send it to a friend. We will see you here next week for the actual season 4 finale. And thank you guys so much for letting us do this. This is our favorite thing. So
bye.
Bye.